So guys, what if Naruto was adopted by Kirito Swordsmen of Twilight special movie? He needed to get away. He needed to keep running. That was the only thing going through the 5-year-old boy's mind and body at the moment as he ran down the street away from a giant mob. Having a bit of trouble due to the large kunai knife in his leg, he had spiky sun-kissed blonde hair, a tanned complexion and 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek of his face. This boy's name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, also known as the container of the Kyuubi, a giant 9-tailed fox that attacked Konohagakure the very day the boy was born. It hadn't been a coincidence of it occurring on that day, because Naruto's mother Kushina Uzumaki had been the previous Inchkriki, and female containers all had one major weakness: when they had a bitch sealed within them, childbirth, all of her chakra and focus was on the life that she would be bringing into the world, meaning that the seal holding the Kyuubi back would weaken and the beast would escape, which is why her husband Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage and leader of the shinobi village, was focusing on keeping her seal in check. What people do not know about that night, however, is that someone had interrupted the newly made parents' happy moment after Naruto had been born, taking the boy temporarily hostage before taking Kushina away to release the Kyuubi. The destruction created by the chakra beast had devastated the land and destroyed a large part of the village. It had killed many shinobis and civilians before it had been stopped by Minato and Kushina, who sacrificed their lives in order to seal the Kyuubi away and save their son from being killed. But even though the monster had been defeated, it did not quell the anger that many of the survivors felt towards the fox, which pointed all of their hatred at Naruto. Well, there was a large handful of people who accepted Naruto as the container for the Kyuubi and nothing else. The larger percentage believed he was the fox reborn in human form and were calling for the baby's death. Minato's predecessor, Hiruzen Sarutobi the Sandaime Hokage, had decreed that Naruto was not to be harmed, and anyone who spoke about the Kyuubi being sealed within him would be executed. But unfortunately his words alone weren't enough to stop the villagers from abusing Naruto in any way that they could. What they were doing now was prime example of their torment, as this was one of their mob hunts, where they would beat Naruto for as long as they could before the Anbu would show up. "Get back here, demon." One of the shinobis in the mob shouted as they threw several more kunai at Naruto's legs, making the boy fall over from the impact. Naruto tumbled a few times before landing on his stomach, tears falling down his face as he tried to move. However, his legs wouldn't respond to his commands at all, due to the blows from the kunai knives paralyzing his legs. But that didn't stop Naruto, as he put all the strength he could in his little arms to continue moving forward. But one of the civilians slammed his foot hard and painfully into Naruto's back and slammed the 5-year-old into the ground. Please, just leave me alone." "Shut up, you demon brat. You have no right to make any request. You should have died all those years ago when you attacked the village." The villager snapped back as he grinding his foot painfully into the boy's spine. "Yeah, you deserve to suffer for what you did to us. Let's make him pay. Someone please, I don't want to die. Please help me." Naruto closed his eyes as the man standing over him was raising his weapon over his head before swinging it down as hard as he could. But just as the club was about to hit Naruto, a glowing seal in the shape of a spiral appeared on his back before several chains erupted from it and impaled the man through the chest. The villager didn't have time to register what was happening as the chains continued to move and tossed the man away and moved around Naruto in a circular pattern. "Naruto!" An elderly man wearing a red and white robe called out as he and a large group of masked shinobi known as Anbu landed several feet away. This man was Hiruzen Sarutobi the Sandaime Hokage. The concerned look on the man's face was the last thing Naruto saw before he lost conscious. But that didn't stop the chains as they continued to glow brighter and brighter before tightening around Naruto's body, and with a blinding flash of light Naruto disappeared, leaving behind a large scorch mark on the ground. "Hokage-sama, what was that? What happened to Naruto?" A young silver-haired Anbu asked as he took a hesitant step. His sensei's son had just vanished without a trace. The older man was quiet for a few minutes before slowly shaking his head. Minato and Kushina must left a delayed seal on Naruto. Those two always liked to make sure they were prepared for any situation. Sarutobi deduced as he held his head down with a pain-filled expression. Since Kushina had been the Kyuubi's previous Inchkriki, she would know more than anyone the horrible life that awaited Naruto. "I am ashamed to admit her beliefs came true. We must get him back as soon as possible, Hiruzen. We cannot afford to lose our weapon." A bandaged man, around the same age as Sarutobi, said as he tightened the grip he had on his cane. "You will address me as Hokage-sama, Danzo." Sarutobi snapped his gaze towards the man and the two people behind him, the two being Sarutobi's old teammates and advisors Hamura and Kaharu. "And I'm afraid that there isn't anything we can do now, not unless we want to send our shinobis to their deaths." "What do you mean, Hokage-sama?" Another Anbu, this one female with long purple hair and a cat mask, questioned as she looked at the scorched spot that Naruto had previously been. The seal that Minato and Kushina used was a Jiken ninjutsu. It is not only impossible to know where they sent him, but it is also dangerous for the people traveling though, Sarutobi explained as he tipped his hat. From what they had told me, if the caster isn't with the person who is traveling through dimensions, then it is basically a one-way trip. And not only that, there is a strong possibility that they could lose their chakra as soon as they get there, or in the worst case scenario die. So you are saying that we've lost the Kyuubi forever? Several of the villagers began to cheer, but were quickly put to a halt as a large amount of killer intent filled the air. The killer intent belonged to Sarutobi, who was giving almost everyone in the area a death glare. Anbu. Arrest all of the villagers and shinobi here and bring them to Ibuki. They will all be executed tomorrow in the morning. Many were taken aback by his words and voices of protests filled the air as all of the Hokage's Anbu platoon followed his orders, which several including the cat mask Anbu, a weasel mask Anbu and the silver-haired Anbu, was more than happy to follow and began taking them away. The old man turned his back to everyone as he walked towards the spot Naruto had disappeared from, speaking up before anyone could say anything. They broke my laws and used up their second chances. Now they will face the consequences of their actions. I am the Hokage, and my word is law. Now leave me. While Himura and Kaharu silently looked at each other before nodding their heads and started to walk away, Danzo was silently calculating in his head as he too turned around and made his way out of the area. This would have never happened if I had been Hokage. Now I must find a way to retrieve the Kyuubi from whatever dimension it ended up in. Otherwise the village will be powerless against our enemies. Back with Sarutobi, as soon as the old man could no longer sense anyone in the area, he finally let his tears fall. Forgive me Minato, Kushina, I was unable to protect your son like I had promised. Naruto, wherever you are my boy, I hope you live a much happier life than you could have ever had here. In another dimension, Naruto could hear the familiar sound of beeping as he started to open his eyes, expecting to see himself in one of the Konoha hospital rooms, but once he had fully opened his eyes, he noticed he was in an unfamiliar room. It was definitely different from what he was used to. For one thing, this room was a lot cleaner than the ones they usually gave him, and looking to the side he saw several large machine-like things that he didn't recognize, and that was saying something from the many times he had been to the hospital. Turning his head a bit, Naruto could hear the muffled sounds of people talking outside the door to his room. From what we can tell, malnourishment, a few broken stab wounds, lost a large amount of blood, most of them healed completely, however won't recover. Naruto could hear more muffled voices speak and the sound of someone, a woman by the sound of it, crying, "Who do such a innocent boy?" Shaking his head a little, he started to raise his upper body up as much as he could before flinching from the pain he felt in his legs. Wait a minute. With fear building up in his body, Naruto tried to move one of his legs and then the other, but to his great dismay, he couldn't move either of them. He threw off the covers and saw that his legs were completely covered in bandages. Tears started to build up in his eyes as he continued to try and move his legs, but no matter how much he tried they wouldn't move. Naruto had started to get desperate as he struggled to move his body around in the bed, but ended up falling off the mattress and hitting the floor. Some of the wirings and needles from different pouches detached from his body, which caused a few more sounds to occur and alarms to go off. The door slammed open to reveal a doctor in a white lab coat rush into the room, followed by 3 other people. 2 of them were middle-aged, while the last one was a teenager who was paying attention to his book more than anything. "Hold on, you shouldn't be trying to move so soon," the doctor said as he tried to help Naruto back onto the bed, but the young blonde fought out of the man's grip and struggled to get away from the man. "Get away, I don't want to get hurt anymore," Naruto cried out as he pressed himself against a wall. "Relax son, no one here is going to hurt you," the second older man said as he held his hands up to show the boy his empty hands. "All we want to do is help you." "Liar," Naruto shouted as he clenched his tiny hands into fists. "People are always trying to hurt me, saying that I should be dead. Why should I believe any of you?" Naruto was cut off as the woman immediately appeared in front of him and pulled him into a tight hug. At first Naruto tried to escape out of the woman's grasp, but she held strong. "You poor boy, I promise we won't do anything to hurt you." Naruto was surprised on how kind and warm her words were, as well as the strange feeling he was getting from whatever she was currently doing. After a few minutes Naruto finally calmed down enough for the adults to place him back on his bed. The woman was sitting in one of the chairs next to the bed and holding one of his hands, to which he was staring at with confusion and slight fear. The teenager from before had noticed this from his place against one of the walls on the opposite side of the room. "It's like no one's ever held his hand before. My name is Kirito Kayaba, and this is my wife Akihiko. The boy over there is my son Akihiko," Kirito said as he introduced his family to the boy, who looked back and forth to all the people in the room. Kirito was an older man with long black hair and glasses over his brown eyes, while Akihiko had light brown hair and calming blue eyes. "We had found you earlier badly injured in the middle of the road with those strange knives in your legs. I'm used to that. The adults usually do a lot worse to me before they get bored and walk away before anyone shows up," Naruto answered while turning his head to look away. It's been like that since I had been kicked out of the orphanage. Kicked out, Akihiko repeated with an edge in her voice. She cold imagined the kind of monsters that would just attack an innocent boy and let alone leave him so injured he couldn't move. Since she was a mother, it was hard to stomach such an idea, and that's when she realized the last thing he had said. So your parents are. I never met them. A lot of people were saying that my parents abandoned me when they found out I was a demon or that they were dead. Tears fell down Naruto's face as he gripped the blankets now covering his legs. But I never believed the first one though. My family would never hate me, right? Of course, sweetie, I'm positive they never hate you, Akihiko said in a soothing voice as she brushed her thumb on the back of Naruto's hand, trying to comfort the boy as best as she could. As a mother, I can definitely say that they loved you. So tell me, Naruto, do you have any relatives or someone living with you? Someone we can get in contact with to let them know where you are and about your condition, the doctor questioned as he looked down at the medical chart the hospital had created for Naruto, since there was no records for him in any system. Naruto only shook his head as he rubbed out the tears on his face. No one. There was the old man when he visited me, but I don't really see him that much. I live all by myself. Akihiko, Kirito and the doctor all looked at each other before Akihiko spoke up. Naruto, sweetie, the three of us are going to go out into the hallway for a second to talk about a few things. In the meantime, Akihiko will be here to keep you company. The teenager perked up at what his mother said, before slowly nodding his head in agreement when she turned to look at him. The three adults in the room quickly made their way outside, leaving Naruto and Akihiko in the room alone. Naruto and Akihiko stared at each other quietly for a few seconds, before the teenager looked at Naruto and silently studied his condition, taking in what the doctors had said about the blonde suffering from malnutrition and the injuries in his legs. Naruto studied the teen and took in his appearance. Akihiko looked to be in his late teens, and he looked like a younger version of Kirito with short dark brown hair and brown eyes, and was wearing a black clothing. The younger boy's gaze went down to the object in Akihiko's hands before speaking up. What's that thing? Akihiko looked down at the book he had closed earlier. It's a book, you know, to tell stories or give information. Stories? You mean things like samurais and princesses? Naruto asked in an excited voice. Is it a good story? Akihiko let out a laugh. Yeah, I guess you could say that, but this book here is a little more complicated than that, but it does have a good plot to it. Plot? Naruto tilted his head with a curious expression, which gave him the appearance of a fox thanks to his whiskers. What's that? The plot is the main events of the story. It makes it interesting to the reader, Akihiko explained as he moved away from the wall and sat on the bed next to Naruto, handing him the book. If the plot to a story isn't good, it can get really boring for the person who's reading it. What are these weird lines? Naruto asked as he pointed to the back of the book. That is a summary. It helps get people interested in reading. I'm surprised you don't know how to read. Most kids your age already know a few words, the teenager commented, which caused Naruto to gain a depressed expression on his face. Is something wrong? It's not like I never tried, but every time I ask for help the people at the orphanage would say demons don't deserve to know anything before they threw me into the attic for days. It was a few months later that they had kicked me out, saying that no sane person would want a demon for a son. Naruto's body trembled as his grip on the book and blanket tightened. Akihiko stared at the boy silently before slowly taking the book out of the boy's hand. Well then, how about I teach you a little bit now? Naruto's head snapped up to see the older boy open the book to the very first page, flashing Naruto a small smile. It may be a little much for you, so we can take it one step at a time. Naruto looked down from Akihiko's face to the open book. Thanks. Outside the room, Akihiko watched with a warm smile as her son and Naruto talked and looked at the book. She slowly closed the door to turn and face her husband. You already know what I am going to say, right, Kirito? Of course, but are you sure you want to? The older man questioned as he placed a hand on his hip. We pretty much finished raising Akihiko, who is already getting approved for universities. But you can see the look on that boy's face. There is really no one else he could turn to, unless you think we should abandon him. Akihiko crossed her arms as she gave her husband a pointed look, who held his hands up in a surrendering motion. No, I had no intention of suggesting that, Kirito replied as he tried to calm his wife. With the life has gone through until now, I don't want to take the chance of something like that happening again. It would be even worse for him since he can no longer walk. Good, I'm glad we agree. Now let's go back inside. Can you get us the release forms, doctor? Akihiko said with a smile, to which the man nodded his head before heading off to retrieve the paperwork. After watching the man walk around the corner, the two parents re-entered the room and could see Naruto was listening to Akihiko as the teenager read a few sentences from the book. The sound of the door closing made Akihiko pause, and the two looked up to see that Akihiko and Kirito had re-entered the room. It certainly looks like you two were having fun. Yeah, Akihiko was reading me the story in this book. It's really cool with the magic and swords. His words confused the two as they knew that the book their son was reading was about mathematics. The blank expression Akihiko made to look away from them was surprising, since as far that they remembered, he had never done things like this for anyone before. While it was strange to see the high school student act so close to Naruto, the actions did help them with confirming their decision. I am glad to hear that you are enjoying your time with him, Naruto, because there is something that I wanted to ask you. Kirito walked close to the bed until he was a foot away, giving Naruto a bright smile as he bent his knees a little. I know you don't really know us that much, but my wife and I want to adopt you and make you our son, so how about it, would you like to be a part of our family? Naruto was shocked at what the man had said. He never thought anyone would ever say those words to him. Silently the blonde looked at Akihiko, who was giving him a bright smile as he recalled the warm comforting feeling he had gotten from her before. Naruto turned his head a bit to look at Akihiko, and how nice the older boy had been. Looking back at Kirito, he could see the kindness and sincerity in his eyes. With the situations he had been through in Konoha, he had learned to detect any deceptive looks or lies. It was one of the reasons on how he managed to stay alive for so long, well, that and his healing abilities which seemed to help him recover injuries overnight. Tears started to build up once again in Naruto's eyes as he slowly nodded his head. Why, you guys really want me? Of course we do, sweetheart, but the decision is up to you, Akihiko replied as she walked a little closer to the bed. We don't want to force you to make any decisions you don't want to. A few seconds was all that it took for Naruto to decide what he wanted, and he quickly wrapped his arms around Akihiko's waist. The woman smiled as she copied his movements and wrapped the boy into a hug. Well, that was happening, Akihiko, and Kirito watched with smiles. It looks like the family had one more member to add to the Kayaba name. In 2022, humanity has finally create a complete virtual environment in a game called Sword Art Online. The trailer video was blaring on a large flat-screen television before it quickly shifted to a news-like channel that was completely focused the game and the impact it was making. It's time for this week's MMO stream. We began with a promotion video. Was this the day of last week's launch? What with all of the people waiting in line for Sword Art Online? It looks like the popularity for my brother's game is really going through the roof. Look at that line coming from just one of the stores, a 15-year-old Naruto said with a smile as he sat several feet away from the television in a wheelchair. He continued to watch as more and more people talked about the game and saw many pose with their newly purchased game and/or nerve gear. It's great to see all of his work being enjoyed like this, right, Sayoko? The blonde turned his head to see a maid with dark brown hair and yellow eyes walk into the room with a small smile on her face. I definitely agree, Naruto-sama, and it is a good thing you already have a copy thanks to your brother. He even had you be one of its first beta testers. Moving over to one of the tables next to Naruto, Sayoko reached out to the tea set and poured a cup. Would you like some tea, Naruto-sama? Ah, yes I would, thank you Sayoko, Naruto replied as he turned his head back to the screen. I'm sorry to trouble you like this, even though it's supposed to be your day off. It is no trouble at all, Naruto-sama. Akihiko-sama is sure to be very busy with his new game and making sure everything is running smoothly. I am happy to be here to help. Sayoko bowed her head a little with a smile on her face. Naruto had always been a kind soul. She had served a number of people before the Kayaba family, many of them had all sorts of personalities, but the later were most definitely the most pleasant that she had ever been around. Almost 2 weeks have passed and the lines to the game stores are still so long. From the looks of it they're going several blocks back, Naruto noted as he took a sip of his tea before placing it on the table next to him, and everyone seemed so excited about it. Sayoko let out a giggle as she brought a hand to her looks. Can you really say that you're so different from them, Naruto-sama? You really enjoyed yourself during the beta testing. It was all you thought about even when you weren't in the game. Well, of course, it wasn't just exciting to play. I got to meet a lot of people as well. Naruto rubbed the back of his head with a smile on his face. An entire virtual world is an amazing concept in and of itself. Just thinking about all the options, bosses, and adventures a player can do can make anyone tremble with excitement. Speaking of meeting a lot of people, Naruto-sama, Sayoko started as she glanced at a clock resting on the wall. Don't you have to meet up with your friend in that town of beginnings you were telling me about? That's right, Naruto perked up before using the controller on his wheelchair to spin around, flashing the maid a smile as he finished turning. I'm going in my room now, Sayoko, for a few hours, so you can relax if you want. Understood, Naruto, but I want to take care of a few things before then, Sayoko stated, which made Naruto frown a bit. Enjoy your game and have fun, Naruto-sama. Alright, just don't push yourself too much, Sayoko. Naruto turned his head to face the exit as he made the wheelchair move out of the room. He made his way down the hallway and entered his room, which was a medium size with a desk for studying and several drawers, and a very high-tech computer. Next to one of the drawers was a bookshelf that held many books, manga and video games, all neatly placed in alphabetical order. On the walls of the room were many pictures and posters, though there was one picture that was right next to the computer. It was a family photo of Naruto and his new family, taken a little after he had become a part of their family. It's hard to believe that 10 years had passed since he had lost the ability to use his legs, but to him having an actually family that loved and cared for him had made up for that. Akihiko and Kirito had been the best parents he could have ever asked for, and Akihiko, while distant at times, was an older brother that was always there for him when he needed it. But the happy times had a horrible turn 6 years later when Akihiko and Kirito died in a car accident. But even though Akihiko was in his early 20s and attending a university, that didn't stop the man from raising Naruto, though because of his work and research, Akihiko had brought Sayoko into their home as a maid to assist and watch over Naruto whenever he was not able to return home. Eventually Akihiko had revealed two of his greatest projects, the nerve gear and of remorp named Sword Art Online, and during its beta testing phase, Akihiko had personally asked Naruto to be one of its first testers, to which Naruto enjoyed very much. Naruto's wheelchair rolled past his desk and computer, grabbing his orange nerve gear, which he had personally requested when his brother was making them, and placed it on the bed. He quickly maneuvered himself from his chair onto the bed, which was very easy for him to do on his own after so many years, and manually moved his legs to lie out completely straight. The weird thing he had noticed from the many years he had been handicapped was that even though he couldn't use his legs anymore, they grew in size with him and never shrank, nor had any medical problems. Another strange thing is that the wounds in his legs had completely hid, leaving his legs smooth and clear of any injuries. Shaking his head a bit, Naruto picked up the helmet and put it on. Before making sure everything was on, he lowered his upper body back down until he felt his head hit the pillow. He glanced quickly at the inner clock within the nerve gear and smiled when he saw that it was 2 minutes till 1 o'clock. Perfect, I should make it to the meeting point just in time, Naruto said with a smile before taking a deep breath and closed his eyes. Link, start. As soon as he said that, a barrage of colors seemed to come flying at him as the nerve gear linked with his mind. All the automatic system checks finished quickly, and his language adjuster was set to Japanese, and when all of that had finished a final pop-up appeared. Beta test data still available. Would you like to use it? The good thing about being a beta tester was that you could keep the avatar you created for the game, which was great for those that grew attached to their characters. Naruto quickly selected yes, making the pop-up fade away and new words taking its place. Welcome to Sword Art Online. In a flash of blue light, Naruto found himself in the middle of a large dome-like area, which was actually the arrival point for beginner logins to start. The city he was in was known as the Town of Beginnings, where, like it was stated before, the place where all players start when they log into the game for the first time. But while it was a nice town with a lot of shops and social areas for beginners to meet and make friends, it was still only the first floor out of 100, and like any game the level of monsters, items, and weapons all went up. Naruto looked down at his now glove-covered hands, clenching them a few times before following up to his orange long-sleeve shirt and black vest, and then his gaze went down to the most important thing in his mind, his two perfectly working legs which were covered in black pants. He had a sword, a sheathed wakizashi, strapped horizontally to his lower back. I'm so glad to be back in this awesome world. Naruto cheered as he pumped his fists into air. His avatar's appearance was majorly different from his usual one. Instead of his tanned skin he was fair-skinned. He had violet eyes to replace his usual azure blue, and his spiked blonde hair was instead a straight fiery red. For some reason he had really liked the color red. Every time he seemed to think about it, a blurry image of a woman appeared his mind. And while there was no face or anything to match the woman to anything he had seen before, Naruto couldn't help but feel sad and happy at the same time. Naruto quickly dismissed his thoughts as he remembered that he had a meeting spot to get to, spinning around on his feet as he started to run, past several players that were logging in and talking amongst each other. Naruto was enjoying the feeling of his legs actually working again as he ran past several stands and booths selling a lot of weapons and armors to beginners. To him it was one of the greatest things about full diving into the game. He didn't pay them any mind as he turned a corner and continued to run. This was definitely one of his favorite things in the game, and the one thing he missed most in real life. I hope Kirito is already there. I want to get started as soon as we can. As Naruto dashed down an alleyway at full speed with a grin on his face, he almost didn't see the female player that started walking along the entrance of the alleyway, a book in her hands. He quickly tried to halt his movements so he wouldn't collide into the girl, but he was too close and he crashed into head. The girl in question snapped her head to the side just in time to see something slam into her and sent them crashing into the ground. She could feel the pressure of another body on top of her. Judging by the groan the figure let out, it was a male. The girl quickly pushed the male off her with an annoyed look on her face. Watch where you're going. Sorry, I was in a hurry to meet a friend of mine and I got distracted, Naruto replied, rubbing the side of his head as he shook out a few times before mumbling to himself. I need to remember that there are more people here than last time. Of course there are a lot of people here, it's opening day. Wait, did you say last time? The girl asked as she realized what Naruto had said before, but Naruto didn't seem to hear her question as he rose back up to his feet and patted himself off before moving over to the girl's avatar. The female avatar had long orange-brown hair and was wearing one of the beginner outfits, consisting of a dark red leather tunic over a long-sleeved white shirt with her shoulders showing and white leather pants with boots up to the knees. Quickly dismissing his thoughts, Naruto held out a hand to the girl, to which she started at his hand with wary eyes before lifting her head to look up at him. Like I said before, I didn't mean to run into you. I was in a bit of a rush to meet up with a friend of mine. Are you alright? Yeah, I'm fine, the girl replied as she reached up and grabbed Naruto's hand. Before getting back to her feet, Naruto's gaze went down to the ground to where the book she had been reading before had fallen. He bent down a bit and picked up the book, examining it for a few seconds before handing it to the girl. Thanks. That's one of the guidebooks sold for free at the item shops, right? Naruto noted as he smiled at the girl. A lot of work was put into that by the beta testers. I hope it comes in handy. I do too. This is my first time in a game like this, so I figured I should try to find out as much as I can. Maybe if I like the game I can get one of my own, the girl said with a smile, though Naruto could see that she had her guard up a little as she talked, which made some sense since as she said before, this was her first time playing an MMORPG, let alone one that involved full diving and almost fully exposing yourself to others. So I'm guessing that you are borrowing it. Seems a little strange with how long the lines had been to buy one of the copies. After seeing how long the lines had gotten to buy the game until today, he didn't think anyone would have turned down the chance to play on opening day. Hell, part of him didn't think twice on the chance that Akihiko would get involved in the game too. Even if he was the one who created it. Speaking of which, he couldn't help but wonder why his brother didn't answer his call earlier or even call him back. I was hoping the two of us could playing together. Has been so busy with his work recently. Well, it's actually my brother's copy, the long-haired girl explained, letting out a small laugh as she remembered the condition her brother was in. After he had waited for a whole day to get the game and the nerve gear to go with it, he crashed right onto the floor of his room before he could even get a foot away from the door. He was so excited to play it, but unfortunately he had been called on business and he couldn't be here to play. I got curious and decided to give it a shot, though things are still new to me. Yeah, it always like that at first, Naruto said as he flashed the girl a friendly smile, which she mirrored after a few seconds. He held his hand out to the girl. My name's Naruto. I'm Asuna, the newly named Asuna replied before reaching out her own hand and shook his. Naruto nodded his head and was about to say something, but his head perked up when he got a message alert. Sorry Asuna, I think my friend sent me a message. Quickly swiping his hand downwards, Naruto checked his inbox and found a new message that was sent from Kirito. Apparently he was already heading to the West Fields with another player to show them the ropes and to meet them there. This didn't bother the redeeted avatar since he enjoyed helping out others when he could, and the fact that Kirito was the one who decided to help was great because he usually tried to keep to himself. Naruto dismissed the note and turned to look at Asuna. It looks like Hess already heading out to fight some monsters, so I am going to meet him there. Did you want to come? We could help give you some tips. No, it's fine, Asuna politely declined with a smile. It's only the first day, so I don't have to do anything to major, right? I guess that's true. Naruto turned back to his menu, which was still open, and silently did a few motions. Asuna watched in confusion before a pop-up appeared in front of her. Naruto wants to add you as a friend, would you like to do the same? She looked between Naruto and the pop-up a few times before the redeeted male spoke up. I know we just met and all, but I do hope we can still become friends in the future, and this way if you have any questions or issues, just let me know. It's your choice if you want to accept it or not, but I still hope we can meet again. This is a good place to make friends and have fun. Naruto turned around and started to walk away, waving his hand goodbye as he walked. See you later Asuna. Asuna watched as Naruto's figure walked into the large crowd of people before disappearing from her sight. She looked down at the friend request with a look of suspicion for several minutes. A little while later she shook her head with a very small smile and pushed one of the option buttons. Asuna spun on her heels and started off in the direction she had been originally going. The smile still on her face as she walked through the crowd to see all the shops in the area. I guess this game won't be so bad after all. I'll have to see about getting a copy for myself when there are more available in stores. Meanwhile, Naruto was making his way to the West Fields when he got an alert from his menu. He opened it to see the words Asuna has agreed to your request. You both can now message each other and keep an eye on each other's locations. Naruto shook his head with a smile as he continued to his destination. It was always great when he made new friends. He never got the chance back in Ko. Naruto quickly shook his head again as he knocked the thoughts out of his head. That place was the last thing he ever wanted to think about. Hey Naruto. a voice called out from a distance away. He narrowed his eyes a little when he saw two figures standing near one of the trees, and a small grin appeared on his face as he recognized one of them an older-looking boy with long, spiky hair. He was wearing one of the beginner's outfits like his but in blue and black, and he had a brown leather vest instead of black. The person next to him had long red hair and a bandana over his forehead. He was also wearing a beginner's outfit as well that was white and brown, and like Kirito, he had a brown leather vest. "Kirito, it's been a while." Naruto shouted back with a smile as he ran up to the two. When he got close to the two beta testers slammed their fists together, "And thanks for switching the meeting spots on me, you jerk." "Yeah, well I agreed to help this guy here with starting out, let me introduce you guys." Kirito took a step back as looked back and forth at the two redeeds. "Naruto, this is Klein, and Klein, this is my best friend and fellow beta tester Naruto." "Nice to meet ya," Klein said with a grin as he gave Naruto a thumbs up. "I'm glad you and Kirito agreed to help me out, real nice of you guys." Naruto blinked a few times before silently giving Kirito a look, who had let out a sheepish laugh while scratching his cheek. The fiery redeed let out a soft sigh before shrugging his shoulders. "Sure, why not, it actually might be kind of fun, never been a teacher before and I might get a good show out of it." "Great, then let's get a." Klein tilted his head a bit when he realized the final thing Naruto had said. "What do you mean show?" "Yuga." Klein let out a yellow as he was rammed by a frenzy boar monster in between his legs and was sent flying back. "Like I said, a good show," Naruto said with a laugh up to Klein's fallen form. Well, Kirito let out a sigh. Behind them the frenzy boar had turned its back to the players. When Naruto came to a stop he was standing over Klein, bending his knees a little before he spoke. "You really need to keep your guard up when you fight." "Ugh, right in the crotch," Klein whined as he held his crotch like he was in extreme pain. "Someone kill me now." "Give me a break, you don't feel any pain right?" Kirito commented while crossing his arms. His words made Klein stop as the older redeed noticed he was right. It's only critical moves that actually cause pain, and none of the monsters around here can do that. You need to remember that the most important thing is your initial motion input. Klein made his way back to his feet with a grunt. "That's easier said than done. That thing is moving around too much for me to even try." "It's all about timing, as long as you perform it correctly," Naruto said as he reached down and picked up a rock before getting into a throwing stance. Klein could see the rock in Naruto's hand glow red for a few seconds before throwing it at the frenzy boar from behind. The rock soared fast at the boar and slammed into its ass. "The system will take care of the rest, and you'll definitely hit your target." Initial motion, Klein mumbled to himself as he took a stance while he placed both hands on his sword. The frenzy boar reacted quickly and turned to the three with a pissed off look on its face, before charging at the closest one to it, which was a smirking Kirito who had his sword drawn. The black-haired swordsman easily dodged the attack before blocking the boar as it turned around to attack again. An easy way to look at it is that you add a slight pause. As soon as you feel the skill begin to activate, drive it home as hard as you can. Drive it home. A look of realization appeared on Klein's face before as he took a stance with his sword placed over his shoulder, and a few seconds later his sword started to glow. Naruto grinned as he saw this and turned to Kirito. "I think has got it now, Kirito." "Perfect, let's see how you do." Kirito said with a smile as he parried the boar to the side and kicked it towards the position Klein. Klein in return let out a battle cry as he charged toward the boar, slashing it in half and reducing its health to 0 before it exploded into glass. "Alright." Klein cheered after seeing the results of his attack and the points he had gotten for winning. "Congrats," Kirito said as he and Klein high-fived. The black-haired swordsman sheathed his sword and placed a hand on his hip. "However, those frenzy boars are as weak as a slime from other games." "Seriously, I thought that was a mid-level boss or something," Klein exclaimed, but much to his disappointment, Naruto pointed over to an empty field several yards away from them, where more frenzy boars started to appear. "Well, that sucked. If this game had monsters that were that weak, then it would get boring really fast," Naruto said as he and Kirito looked at the surrounding area. "Well, things are okay when easy. Things can be a lot more fun when there are challenges." "I guess that's true." Klein nodded his head in agreement before looking down at his sword, going back into the position he had been in before he could feel the same sensation he had felt just as he attacked the boar, swinging his blade forward to release the skill that had built up. "So anyway, there are a lot of skills, right? Like blacksmithing and stuff." Kirito nodded as he and Naruto watched Klein swing his sword around, moving into different positions with each swing. "Yeah, I heard there are unlimited numbers of skills, but there is no magical spells or anything like that." "Man, to create an RPG without magic, that's a pretty bold decision to make," Klein commented as he got into his first stance once again and charged his skill before slashing forward. After a few seconds, Klein's body started to tremble with excitement. "This is so awesome, being able to move my body like this is too cool." "Yeah, it's out of this world," Naruto said with a sad smile before he started to walk off, leaving a somber Kirito and a confused Klein. "Was it something I said?" Klein asked as he turned to look at Kirito, who shook his head. I didn't find this out until later on, but in real life Naruto's legs are completely paralyzed. Klein was surprised to hear that, turning his head to look at Naruto's back as he continued to walk. Being able to play in a game like this with full diving is the closest Hess had to walking in years. He says that doctors may be able to cure him in the future, but that is still way off. But even with his condition he never lets things bother him. Hess a strong person. Hey, you guys. Naruto shouted from a distance, making the two turn to look at him. The smile on his face was once again happy as he motioned to the monsters in the distance. Are you two going to stand there all day, or do you want to go hunting? On our way. Kirito shouted before turning to Klein, so forgetting about the depressing stuff, you want to move on? Klein was quiet for a few seconds before he started to grin, getting a head start as he and Kirito started to run to where Naruto was standing. Of course, let's get moving. A little while later, by the time the three had taken a break from fighting, the game system had changed the day settings and shifted it into a sun-setting theme. The three of them sat near one of the cliffs and watched as the virtual sun's light spread throughout the area. The fields, the towns, the waterfalls, everything seemed to grow more beautiful by the second. Naruto and Klein was sitting near the edge of the cliffs with Naruto sitting right at the edge with his legs dangling over the side. Kirito was standing next to Klein with his arms crossed and a content look on his face. I still can't believe it, no matter how many times I see it. Klein said as he watched the beautiful view in awe, catching sight of a few creatures flying in the distance. We're inside a game, whoever made this place is a freaking genius. Naruto couldn't help but smile when he heard that. It was times like this that he was proud to be Akihiko's younger brother. There were times when he couldn't believe such things existed, going into the virtual world, meeting and making friends with people on the other side of the world, and fighting monsters with skills that normal people wouldn't have, not including the people from where he was from. But they were ninjas that could control the elements and bend them to their will, so it wasn't fair to compare them to the people in this world. It's really beautiful, Klein continued with grin as he leaned back into his hand. This kind of thing makes me glad that I was born in this time. Kirito shook his head with low chuckle, you're making a big deal out of everything. Give me a break, it's my first time full diving. Klein argued as he raised his arm and waved it in the air. So it's your first full dive? Naruto turned his body around to face Klein, one of his legs still dangling over the edge. So that means this is your first time ever playing with a nerve gear. As soon as I could, I rushed out and bought the all hardware needed to play. I was pretty lucky to get one of the 10,000 copies available. Klein nodded his head while puffing out his chest before pointing at Kirito and Naruto, who rose up from his seat and stood next to his friend. But you two are 10 times luckier with getting the chance to beta test this game. It was something only 1,000 people had the chance to be a part of. Naruto and Kirito looked at each other before shrugging at the same time. Before Kirito spoke, I guess we were. So how far did you two get in the beta? Klein asked, really curious to hear how the two did against this game. Well, the highest we could get in a few months was floor 8, Kirito answered. Naruto grinned as he placed his hands on his hips, but while it was hard in the beta testing, I have no doubt we'll get even higher in that time. We'll only need 1 month to easily get to floor 8. Kirito was also grinning as he nodded his head in agreement. Huh, it seems like you two are really into this, Klein said in amusement as he watched the two bump the back of their fists together. To be honest, Kirito took a few steps away from the two and unsheathed his sword. During the beta test, Sao was the only thing I can think of day and night, because in this world, a single blade can take you anywhere you want to go. He stopped for a second as he stared up at his blade. It's a virtual world, but still feel more alive than in the real world. Naruto closed his eyes as he thought about what Kirito had said, and while his friend was right about most of it, there were some things in the real world that could never be replaced the virtual one. This game was addicting because of its concept, and being in a world where you could do almost anything. Even he had to admit there were times he would want to stay in this world forever. But that wasn't how things were. He had 2 lives, both here and in the real world, and he truly loved being a part of both of them. Anyway, Kirito said as he placed his sword back in its sheath, want to hunt some more? Shaking his head a bit to clear his thoughts, Naruto punched one of his fists into his palm. Game, let's kick some more monster ass. Hell yeah. Klein exclaimed with as he lifted himself up a bit, but his gaze went down as he held his stomach. But to be honest, starting to get really hungry, so logging out. Eating food here only made you think you're full, Naruto pointed out as he recalled many times when he would eat in the game and be starving when he logged out. Ah, well, don't worry. I already ordered a hot pizza for 5:30. Klein smirked as he turned to Kirito and Naruto. Kirito couldn't help but feel a sweat drop down the back of his head as he stared at the seated Reed. Wow, you're so prepared. Of course. and after I finish eating I'm coming back to play some more, Klein said as he stood up, patting his pants for a second before turning to face his two new friends. Hey guys, after I log back and I was gonna meet up with some people I know from another game, if you guys want, you can friend them too, and we can all hang out. Kirito silently looked away, which caused Naruto to rub the back of his head with a sigh. His black-haired friend could be such a loner sometimes, that would be great, but maybe some other time, Klein. Of course, you don't have to if you don't want to. Klein could easily sense the awkwardness in the air, though it was mostly focused around Kirito. It's okay, I'll introduce you two on a later time. Yeah, sorry, Kirito said with hints of guilt in his voice, his gaze falling to the ground. Thanks anyway. Suddenly he felt something hit the back of his head, making him turn to see Naruto giving him a look. What the hell? You really need to lighten up, man, Naruto grunted as he turned to look at Klein. We'll definitely meet them sometime, Klein. We just need to pick a good time for that to happen, maybe after you and your friends get more used to this place. Yeah, you're probably right about that, but still, I owe you guys for helping me. Klein patted the two players on the shoulders. I'll be sure to pay you back for your help someday, virtually that is. Of course, Kirito muttered in amusement while Naruto let out a laugh. But seriously, you two, thanks for everything, Klein said as he extended his hand, to which Kirito accepted and shook his hand. He moved over to Naruto, who simply held out his fist before mirroring his actions and bumped his fist against the other redeeds. If you or your friends have any question, just message me or Kirito, Naruto said with a grin. Yeah, we'll be here to help if you need it. Kirito was smiling as well as he crossed his arms. Klein nodded his head with a smile. Yeah. He'll be sure to do that. See you guys later. He turned around and walked away from the two, and then he heard the sound of something being hit. Ow, what was that for? Naruto's voice was heard. Now we're even, that was Kirito's only reply. Klein only shook his head as he listened to the two as they started to argue. They were definitely a unique pair. With a downward swipe of his hand to open his menu, he started looking down the menu for the logout button. What the hell? It made the two players behind him pause as they turned to look at him. Kirito was the first one to speak as they made their way next to Klein. What's wrong? There's no button to log out, Klein answered, not taking his gaze off the menu. That made Naruto narrow his eyes as he came to a stop a few feet behind Klein. It should be there at the bottom of the main menu. Look closer. I don't see it anywhere, Klein replied, making Kirito and Naruto look at each other before opening their own menus. It's right, huh? Kirito blinked a few times as he looked at the blank spot where the logout button usually was. There isn't anything here. See? Not there, Klein said as he turned to look at the two beta testers. Naruto clicked the settings button and it instantly changed to the setting options. The other buttons are working. What the hell is going on here? Well, it just came out of the beta testing, right? Klein shrugged as he tried to play it cool. The game are bound to have some bug, and I'm sure the server people are freaking out right about now. In a second you will be too, Kirito said with amusement in his eyes, which confused Klein until the black-haired swordsman pointed at the Incred local time clock. It's 5:25 right now. Klein quickly started to panic and let out a cry. No. My teriyaki mayo pizza and ginger ale. Just calm down and call the game master, Kirito said in a calm voice. I've already tried, but I'm getting no response, nothing. Is there any other way to log out? Klein asked as he turned to look at Kirito and Naruto. Naruto turned and took a few steps away from the two, ignoring Klein as he tried various poses and different words to log out. This doesn't seem right. I know Akihiko, and if anything he is thorough when it comes to his work. This kind of thing shouldn't have happened, and the other buttons in the menu are still working like usual. Naruto let out a small gasp as a thought came to mind, one that he didn't want to be true. Is it possible that this isn't a bug? Then that means that someone deliberately did this, and I only know one person with this much control over the game. Behind him, Kirito was explaining to Klein about the developers watching over the game and how they could forcibly log everyone out of the game if the issue was that major. But I don't get why they haven't made an announcement. The three players went silent as they tried to figure out what was going on, but it was quickly brought to a halt as the sound of the Town of Beginnings emergency bell was heard, making them turn towards the town just seconds before they were each covered in a flash of blue light. Town of Beginnings Center Plaza. The next thing they knew, the three of them were standing in the center plaza, and players were being teleported into the area. Soon enough the entire plaza was filled with players. Naruto gritted his teeth a little as he kept close to Kirito and Klein, making sure not to lose either of them in the crowd. That was a forced teleport. Just what the hell is going on and why is everyone coming here? Kirito muttered as he looked around at all the players that filled up the plaza. Everyone had the same looks of confusion on their faces as they looked around questioningly. Hey, look, up there. Someone said, making everyone look up to see a red warning sign which then spread across the sky. Blood like ooze started to flow through the cracks and mold together to form a humanoid-like creature wearing a crimson robe that completely covered his face. Is that a game master? Why doesn't he have face? Is this an event? Welcome players to my world, the hooded figure said with his voice deep and booming, but even then, Naruto knew who it was from the familiar voice. My world? Kirito repeated in a whisper. What does he mean by that? I am Akihiko Kayaba, and as of this moment, the only person who can control this world, the hooded figure greeted. Ever players' eyes went wide after they heard that. It was hard not to know who he was, after all he was the one who created the game they were playing. Is that really him? At some entrance. I'm sure many of you are wondering about the logout button missing from the main menu, Akihiko said while sliding his hand down to summon his own menu, presenting the missing button in question. I wish to tell you that this is not a defect in the game, but a key feature of Sword Art Online. Kidding, right? How can that be a feature? Klein questioned as he and the others continued to look up at the large avatar above them. You cannot log out of SAO, and no one from the outside can shut down or remove the nerve gear. As Akihiko continued to speak, Naruto clenched his hands into fists. If one were to attempt to remove your nerve gear during gamma play, the nerve gear will send microwave signals into your brain and destroy it, ending your life here and in the real world. Many players were shocked at the man's words and voicing their complaints. What's he talking about? Has got to be insane, right guys? Klein asked as he turned to look at his friends. That's right, Kirito answered, not looking away from Akihiko's form, making Klein take a step back in shock. The transmitter in the nerve gear works just like a microwave. If the safety were to be turned off, then it could easily fry the brain in an instant, Naruto continued, remembering some of the notes and information he had learned when reading about his brother's invention. And we can't turn off the power to the nerve gear either, since it has an internal battery inside that can make it for a decent amount of time. Klein shook his head as he tried to wrap his head around what was going on. But this is just crazy. Unfortunately for some players, their family and friends have ignored my warnings as of now. 213 people have died from this horrible fate and are gone forever from both the virtual and real world, Akihiko informed, bringing up several screens filled with news coverages involving all the players that have died and various videos of families and friends breaking down crying. It can't be that many already. Naruto asked in shock before closing his eyes with a pain-filled expression on his face. Akihiko, why, how could you do this? 213, Kirito whispered in disbelief. And no way, I can't believe this. Klein said while bringing a hand to his head. The entire world news has already reporting this, including the deaths, thus you can assume the danger of nerve gear being removed is minimal, so relax and focus on beating the game, Akihiko said calmly, not bothered at all by the many players staring up at him with scared looks. On a very important note, I want you to remember this clearly, there is no method to revive someone in this game. If your HP reaches 0, your avatar will be lost forever, and the nerve gear will instantly destroy your brain. The players can only stare up in silent shock at what Akihiko just calmly proclaimed. The minds of all the beta testers were filled with the many times they had died during the game's beta testing, including Naruto and Kirito. There is only one mean to escape, and that is to complete the game. Currently you are all gathered together on the floor 1, Anchored's lowest level. If you can make your way through the dungeon and beat the boss, you may advance to the next floor. You must continue doing this until you reach floor 100 and defeat the final boss, and once you have done that, you will clear the game. Akihiko explained as he summoned a map of Anchored, showing the players what they would need to accomplish in order to survive and leave the game. Did he just say clear? What is he talking about? Beat all 100 floors? That's impossible, Klein muttered to himself as he looked at the floor before snapping his head up. Not even the beta tester made it that far. Kirito and Naruto only stared up at Akihiko's form in silence, though Naruto's fists were clenching hard. And finally, I've provided a present to all of your inventories, please have a look. Almost instantly everyone opened their menus to see that there was indeed a new item in their storage. Naruto clicked on the item, and a mirror appeared in his hands. A mirror? What's this mirror for? Kirito questioned as he too summoned a mirror. The two turned towards Klein as the man suddenly let out a scream and saw that he was covered by a blue flash of light. They didn't have time to think about it, however, as the other players were covered by it as well, and then the whole area was blinded by the flashes of light. But once the light had disappeared, everything changed. What the hell was that? Naruto muttered as he shook his head to get the blurriness out of his sight. Hey Kirito, Naruto, are you guys okay? Kirito and Naruto turned to see a man wearing Klein's clothes, but this guy had a different face and shorter red hair. Who are you? Kirito asked. And me, and who are you too? The man asked, making Kirito and Naruto look at their respective mirrors and were shocked to see their real faces were reflecting from the mirrors instead of their avatars. They turned to look at each other and study each other's appearances. In Kirito's place was a teenager wearing his clothes, but he had short black hair and black eyes, and he was now shorter than Naruto. Naruto reached up and pulled some of his hair down low enough for him to see, and sure enough it was his normal blonde hair. If I've returned to my normal appearance, then that must mean Klein. That means Yar Naruto and Yar Kirito. Klein exclaimed as he pointed at both of them, but how? It's because of the nerve gear. It covers your entire face with a high-density scan once you put it on. Because of that it can see what the face looks like, Naruto explained as he thought back to when he placed on the nerve gear. But our height and body weight. Kirito questioned as he looked at his body, it had copied it to the last detail. When we used the nerve gear, it had us do this calibration thing right. You had to touch your body all over like this, Klein answered as he patted his arms as an example. That's right, to think his device could copy physical data like this, Naruto said before looking down at his legs. It was a blessing that he still retained the ability to walk even with the changes. But why? What would be the point of this? Klein scratched his head from the confusion he was feeling. "I'm sure he'll tell us," Kirito answered while pointing up towards Akihiko. Right now, you're probably wondering, why? Why would Akihiko, developer of Sword Art Online and the Nerve Gear, do all of this? Akihico's avatar spoke in his usual calm voice. "I created Sword Art Online for one reason, and one reason only, to create a world and have complete control over it, and now, I've achieved that goal." Akihiko, Naruto whispered as he stared hard up at the figure that was his older brother. "This now concludes the tutorial of Sword Art Online and marks its official launch. Good luck, players." Akihiko's avatar started to disappear in a flurry of red mist, and blood-like ooze returned up into the panels above it. Once the liquid and mist completely disappeared, the sky returned back to normal. Akihiko, "After all these years I've learned to tell when he was lying or bending the truth, but this wasn't anything like that," Naruto thought as he clenched a fist as hard as he could. It was all true, every single word. Meanwhile, Kirito looked at his right hand, visualizing a paper cut he had gotten in the real world a few minutes before entering the game. "This is real, the genius who created the nerve gear and created a completely virtual space." Akihiko, after being a fan of his for so long, "I can tell that everything he just said was true. If I die in the game, he'll die in real life." The silence surrounding the area was broken as the sound of a dropped mirror shattering was heard, and then followed by a scream. This seemed to snap everyone out of their stupors, and within a few seconds, everyone started to panic. "Screw you. Let me out. Let me out of here. I can't stay here. I have a meeting after this." "What are you thinking?" Kirito nudged Naruto to get his attention, to which the blonde turned and followed his friend's gaze to one of the entrances that had opened up. The two nodded to each other before turning to a still stunned Klein, both of them grabbing a shoulder as they pulled him out of the plaza before anyone noticed. What the? "Just follow us," that was all Kirito said before he and Naruto dragged out Klein to one of the deserted streets, stopping at an alleyway leading to the town's exit. "Okay, listen to me, Klein, we're heading to the next village right now, we want you to come." "Huh? If what he said is true, and there is no doubt in my mind that it is, then the only way to survive is by making ourselves as strong as possible," Naruto explained as he summoned a map of the first floor. There were several red dots on it that symbolized the other towns. "The resources within a virtual MMORPG, the money and EXP we can earn here are limited. The fields surrounding the town of beginnings will soon be hunted clean. That's why we should head to the next village now, and then we should have an easier time collect points, getting cash and getting stronger," Kirito continued as he looked at the map Naruto had up. "Naruto, and I know the best paths that will be the least dangerous, and even at our current levels, we can get there easily." "Well, thanks, Kirito, but you see, I spent the whole night in line to buy this game with those friends I was telling you guys about." Klein looked back at the direction of the plaza. "They're definitely back there in the plaza, I can't leave them." Kirito and Naruto looked at each other silently. They both knew that if they were to bring more people with them, it would be dangerous for all of them. But before anything could be said, Klein spoke up. "Sorry, but I can hardly ask you guys for anything else, so don't worry about me. You two get your asses to the next village. I used to run a guild to my last game, so it'll be fine, and I can use what you guys taught me to get by no sweat." Naruto had a hesitant look on his face for a few seconds before turning away. Alright then, if you need any help be sure message us, no matter how bad a jam it seems, okay? "Yeah, sure," Klein nodded his head slowly. "Well, this is goodbye, Klein, see you later," Kirito said as he turned as well, and both beta testers started walking away. "Kirito. Naruto." The two boys stopped after a few feet, neither turning back to look at Klein. "You know, you both look much better like this, a lot cooler than your avatars." Naruto and Kirito smiled at that, and the later turned to flash Klein a grin. "And that unkempt, scruffy face of yours suits you 10 times better than the one you had before." The two once again started to make their way down the alleyway, Kirito taking one last glance back and saw that Klein had already left. Kirito, the black-haired teen, turned to his friend, who didn't turn to look at him. "I really don't like goodbyes." "Yeah, I agree, let's go." And with that, the two of them took off in a run, and they kept running, passing the deserted streets, the town's exit, and made it onto the path towards the next town. A lot of things were going through Kirito's head, the real world, the virtual world, his sister and mother, and one last thing, Naruto. "We have to keep going, we will survive this world." "Of course we are." Naruto cried back as he and Kirito were running side by side, his own mind having a rush of thoughts. "Brother, I don't know why you're doing this, but I will find out, and I will take anything this world has to throw at me. I'm no longer that scared child I was back then." A little further down the path, two wolves appear in front of them, ready to attack them, but its presence didn't bother them in the least as they drew their swords. They continued to run as they positioned their blades into the correct places and let their skills charge. The wolves both let out howls before charging forward, their claws and teeth poised to strike. "I will," Naruto started in his mind as his blade glowed brightly from its position in a reverse grip in his hand. "I will." Kirito had the same thoughts going through his mind as he felt his sword skill finish charging. In an instant Naruto and Kirito had cut the wolves in half before continuing to run. The wolves behind them exploded before they even hit the floor. 1 month has already passed and we're still no close to finding the boss room, Kirito muttered as he and Naruto stood against a wall as they walked multiple player walk around the park square, and to make things worse 2,000 people have already died. Naruto turned to his partner with a grin before giving him a pat on the shoulder. "Cheer up, Kirito. That's why we're here until Bana. There was announced about an important boss meeting, remember?" "Yeah, but still, we were in the beta testing, so we should have had some idea on where it could have been. That's the reason we are even going to the meeting, to see what information they may have gotten that was so important," Kirito replied quietly as he noticed a lot of players were starting to gather around the fountain. "Well, you can't expect everything to be the exact same. Every official release is going to be different from its beta testing version, whether it is the small details or the bigger ones." Naruto let out a sigh as he scratched the back of his head. "We've been really lucky so far that most of floor 1 is the same to when we were in the beta test. I suppose you're right about that. It looks like it's about to get started. We should join the others before they get started," Kirito said before kicking off the walk, turning back to Naruto in time to see him do the same. Like Naruto had said, most of the game had been the same as when they were in the beta test, but there were a few quests that were different than when they had took them the first time. Some involved the types of monsters they fought being a little stronger than the originals, while other differences involved extra treasure and rewards for quests. As Naruto took his first step, he came to a halt as a message alert caught his attention and quickly summoned his menu in order to view it. Kirito watched quietly as Naruto skimmed the message before dismissing it with a swipe of his hand. "Is something wrong?" "Nope, not really." Naruto shook his head a few times and flashed Kirito a smile. "I had sent a message to Klein to let him and his friends know about the meeting, but apparently they are on a quest right now in the town before this one." "You talked to Klein?" Kirito's gaze went to the floor with a sad expression, which caused Naruto to release a heavy sigh before smacking his hand into Kirito's back. "Ouch. Hey. You really need to let that go. Klein and his friends are doing just fine. I'm sure we'll see them again." Kirito raised his head a little to look at Naruto, rubbing the area where Naruto had smacked him. "Sometimes I wonder how you can be so positive about things. Believe me, I know that things can turn out ugly, but I like to think that no matter how bad something gets, they could have always turned out worse." Naruto continued to smile as he noticed that many of the players were starting to move to a new location and gave Kirito a light push. "Let's get going. We don't want to miss the meeting." "Right," Kirito replied with a nod before he and Naruto started to follow after the crowd. It didn't take long for Naruto, Kirito and the other players that gathered for the meeting to make their way to the actual meeting spot, which was actually an old amphitheater. Everyone quickly made their way to sit down. Just as a blue-haired man wearing blue armor walked onto the stage, Naruto and Kirito sat at the upper levels of the amphitheater seats, much higher than the other players who were mostly sitting in the bottom 6 levels, though as Naruto sat down next to Kirito, he noticed that there was another person sitting as high as they were, though he wasn't able to see much of the person due to the large reddish-brown cloak they had over their body with a hood covering their face. Naruto studied the cloaked figure for a few seconds before hearing the sounds of someone clapping made his look down at the stage. That person turned out to be the man standing at the center of the stage. "Okay people, now that you're all here, let's get this meeting started. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. For those that want to know, my name is Diable." The newly named Diable pounded his fist against his armored chest with a smile, "and in this game I take the job as knight. There's no job system in this game, dude. Is this meeting some kind of joke? You should take this seriously." Naruto and Kirito silently watched as Diable attempt to calm down the laughing crowd with a wave of his hands, the cheerful smile on his face doing a reversal as he stared out at the crowd with a serious expression. After a few seconds everyone's chatter slowly died down and he started to speak. "Now on to why I called you all here today. My party and I discovered the boss room at the top of the tower." Whatever attention Diable didn't receive from the crowd previously was now completely on the blue-haired man. Naruto shifted his seated position and leaned his arms on his knees. "They managed to find it. We all know that in order to reach the second floor we need to beat the boss. If everyone here works together then we can defeat him, and once we do that we will tell everyone at the Town of Beginnings that it is possible to beat this game." Diable raised his fist, clenching it tightly as his eyes scanned the crowd sitting in front of him. "This duty is something everyone here shares. Don't you all agree with me?" Every stared quietly at the man before them, processing his words for what seemed like hours, until the sound of clapping could be heard from one of the many players there, and before long almost everyone had joined in. Kirito and Naruto only watched with small smiles on their faces. Naruto turned his head slightly to give Kirito a grin. This guy must practice that motivational speech quite a bit, huh? Kirito let out a chuckle, but didn't reply as he continued to listen to the blue-haired man officially start the boss meeting. In order for us to create a successful plan of attack, we will have to discard the typical party numbers and have everyone pair up into groups of at least 6. Diable's eyes scanned the crowds as many had already started to form party groups before continuing. I am saying this to use the raid group tactic, which the best option when fighting bosses. Naruto and Kirito looked at each other before bumping the back of their fists, before looking back down at the other players. They both had a feeling that it would be something like this, which is why they were glad that there was someone at this meeting that they trusted. As they watched several parties being formed, Naruto took notice to the cloaked figure sitting away from them and saw that they hadn't moved from their spot, giving Kirito a slight nudge to catch his attention. The two looked at the cloaked player and then back to each other, nodding their heads at the same time before standing up. Hey there, the cloaked player headed turned a little so they could see who spoke, which had been a blonde teenager with his hand up in greeting and a smile on his face, while a black-haired boy around the same age was standing to the side. Hello, Naruto blinked a few times when he heard the cloaked figure speak with a melodious voice that definitely belonged to a girl, and for some reason he felt as if he had heard it before. So did you get left out? Kirito spoke up as he crossed his arms. The cloak-wearing female shook her head as she turned back to the numerous parties below. Not really, it just looks like everyone are already friends down there. So does that mean you're a solo player? Then how about joining our team? It's just the two of us, and having a third member in our party would be perfect, Kirito offered, to which Naruto nodded his head in agreement as the girl turned in their direction. It would only have to be for this battle. Alright, she said with a nod, to which Naruto smiled before swiping his hand down to summon his menu. He pressed several buttons before pausing for a quick second, his eyes widening a little before returning to normal, and sent the party invitation to the cloaked female. A pop-up soon appeared in front of her, and she glanced down at to read its message, and as she did she let out a small gasp. Naruto sent you an invitation to join his party, do you wish to join? Kirito watched with curiosity as the girl looked up from the screen and just stared at Naruto, who grinned a little before speaking. It's great to see that you're still doing fine. We'll have more time to talk after the meeting, do you think you could wait till then? The cloak-wearing girl nodded her head in response and pressed the green confirmation button, joining Naruto and Kirito's party. Her health bar appeared under theirs in the party list at the top left corner of their sight. Kirito looked at her health bar and saw that the name next to it said Asuna. Asuna, huh? How does she and Naruto know each other? Alright, Diable spoke up a few minutes later when things finally started to quiet down, his words catching everyone's attention as they turned back to look at him. It looks you all managed to find groups to team up with, now then. Hold up a sec. A new voice shouted before the blue-haired man could finish. Everyone turned to look behind them at the very back of the amphitheater, where they could see a male figure standing there with his arms crossed. Not even a second later he manned there for long, as he quickly made his way down to the stage by jumping on the stone seats. The man had strangely spiked sienna hair that looked very similar to a cactus and a small tuft of hair for a beard. His clothes didn't stand out much, the standard clothing used by regular players with a grayscale armor-plated vest and a one-handed sword strapped to his back. The name's Kibeyu, got that? Kibeyu said rudely as he introduced himself before turning his attention from Diable to the crowd of players sitting around the stage, pointing his finger accusingly at them as he continued to speak. Before we leave to take on the boss, I have something I want to get off my chest. There are some of you here that need to apologize to the 2,000 players who have died so far. Kibeyu, was it? The spiky-haired man turned to look at Diable, who had placed a hand on his hip. When you say that, are you talking about the beta testers? Of course I mean them. Kibeyu answered angrily, the day this stupid game started, the beta guys ditched us beginners and all disappeared, the cactus head accused, they took all the good hunting spots and easy quests for themselves, so they alone could get stronger, and ignored the rest of us, Kibeyu said, looking back at the gathered players. Hell, I bet there are some of them here. They should get on their knees and apologize, and give up all the items and money that they've hoarded for themselves. Kibeyu demanded while crossing his arms as if there were no flaws in what he was saying. That is the only real way there can be any trust within the parties. The frown quickly grew on Naruto's face as he stared down at man who interrupted the meeting for his own greed. It was obvious that this Kibeyu didn't really care about the people who died. He only wanted the items that he didn't have. Naruto remembered his parents and brother, warning him about people who assumed everything should be handed to them instead of them earning it, and that he should careful when dealing with them because they can be dangerous if he wasn't careful. The blonde teen narrowed his eyes as he studied the cactus-haired man who definitely fell into that category, before turning his head to glance at Kirito, who seemed to have been affected by his words. But before Naruto could say anything to his friend, another voice spoke up, can I say something? Many heads turned to the source of the voice and saw that it had belonged to a tall male with dark skin. He had brown eyes and goatee. His outfit was a mix of white and brown with a white vest, 2 silver earrings on his left ear, and on his back was a 2-handed battle axe. That guy's huge. Naruto thought to himself as he watched a man walk onto the stage and stop right in front of Kibeu, showing the great difference in their heights as the man's large form towered over the cactus-haired player. Naruto couldn't help but grin as he saw how intimidated Kibeu was by the man's presence, though it was to be expected with a darker man's size. "My name is Agil. Now just to make sure we're on the same page on this," Agil said, drawing the teen's attention back to him. "You're saying that because the beta testers didn't stick around to take care of the beginners, they're the ones responsible for all their deaths, and because of that they should take responsibility by apologizing and give up their winnings, is that right?" "Why yeah, that's right," Kibeu replied with a nervous voice. Agil nodded his head before pulling out a small brown book from his back pocket and holding it up for Kibeu to see. "You got one of these guidebooks, didn't you? They were handed out for free at all the item stores." "Sure I got one," Kibeu said defensively. "So, what about it?" "It was compiled from information given by the beta testers," Agil informed him, surprising both him and many of the other players who were listening in on the conversation. Agil spun around on his feet until he was facing everyone seated around the stage. "Listen up. Everyone that's trapped in this game had equal access to this information. Even so, lots of players still died. The reason we are all here is to not point fingers, but so we can learn from their deaths and defeat the floor boss." Agil's words seemed to reach everyone as they nodded their heads in understanding and agreement. Naruto watched Kirito let out a sigh of relief before patting his friend on the shoulder with a smile, which didn't miss as soon as noticed. After he finished speaking, Agil turned back to look at Kibeu with an even look, to which the smaller man reluctantly but quickly backed down from and moved to sit down with an angry grunt. Agil nodded to himself before following Kibeu to the lower seats and sat himself a few feet away. When everyone was seated, Diable reached into his pocket and pulled out his own guidebook. "Now that that is taken care of, how about we get back to the meeting? In my hand here is the latest issue of the guidebook, and it contains information on the floor boss." Diable opened the book and started reading the information within it, involving the first boss. According to it, the boss name is Ilfang the Cabled Lord. He is guarded by several minions known as the Ruined Cabled Sentinels. Ilfang himself is armed with an axe and a buckler. He has 4 life bars, and when the last hit read, he switched to a curved sword type of weapon called a tower. He also has the ability to change his attack pattern anytime he wants. Whoa. Amazing. None of the other monsters on this floor have that ability. After finishing the briefing on the upcoming battle, Diable closed the book and looked back up at the large group in front of him. "This concludes our boss meeting. Money will be automatically distributed. The EXP goes to the party that defeat the monster, and whoever gets an item keeps it. Any objections?" No one said anything as they all silently agree with the terms of their raid. "Alright, we'll head out tomorrow at 10 in the morning to head to the boss room. Make sure you're all prepared, and I'll see you all tomorrow." Once he said those words, everyone began to move, whether it was to leave the area or go head to the stage where Diable was. Kirito watched as Kibeu apologized to the man for interrupting the meeting, though he had the feeling the man wasn't complete behind his words. As Kirito turned to look at his friend, he was surprised to see that Naruto was already on his feet with Asuna and about to walk out of the amphitheater. Naruto stopped for a second and turned to him before motioning him to follow, to which Kirito nodded in response before standing up himself. As the three were walking out of the area, they didn't notice Diable turning his head to look at them, his eyes narrowing a little as he stared at their backs. "It's great to see you're still alive, Asuna," Naruto said to the girl sitting across from him and Kirito. The 3 players had found a small bakery that had tables outside and were relaxing as they ate some of the bakery's special breads while Naruto and Kirito were relaxing. Asuna was still wearing her cloak and sitting straight the entire time. "I was a little worried at first because you were only staying in one place for a while. So how exactly do you know each other?" "I don't think we crossed paths with her since we've been stuck in this game," Kirito asked in curiosity as he looked between Naruto and the mysterious Asuna. "We actually met on the first day," Naruto answered with a smile. "She was the one I was telling you about, the one I had bumped into while heading to our rendezvous point. We haven't seen each other since then, but before we became friends before parting, so I was able to keep an eye on her from time to time, thanks to the friends list options. But like I said before, it's nice to see you again, Asuna. You've gotten a lot stronger." Asuna nodded her head as she took a bite of one of the breads, chewing it slowly before swallowing it. "These are pretty good." "Yeah, Kirito and I have been eating these once a day since we came to this town, and if you think that it's good now you should try it with one of these." Naruto smiled as he reached into his pockets before pulling out 2 jars. One was golden yellow and the other was a reddish purple. "The breads in this town are tasty, but having them over and over again can get boring unless you spice things up." "Spice things up?" Asuna repeated before reaching out and tapped the top of the golden yellow jar, causing the finger she used to start glowing. She looked up from her finger at Naruto and Kirito. "Just move your finger over the bread and enjoy," Kirito said before taping the other jar, causing his finger to glow as well before he swiped it over his loaf of bread. A second later, the top of his bread was covered the reddish-purple liquid, which looked suspiciously like jelly. Asuna tilted her head before looking down at her finger and swiped her finger over the bread. A second later her bread was also covered with a topping, except this one wasn't jelly, this is cream. She stared down at the bread wearily for a few seconds before hesitantly bringing it to her mouth and biting down on the cream-covered pastry, and not even a second later she scarfed down the bread as fast as she could, still feeling the wonderful taste in her mouth. Asuna grabbed another bread before reaching out and taping the jelly jar before swiping it over her bread. Naruto and Kirito watched in amusement as the cloaked girl finished her bread in an instant before finishing their own. There is a quest one village back called the Heifer Strikes Back, which is where you get the original cream. Original cream? Yeah, once you get the cream you can either get it for free anytime you go to the town, or you can learn to create your own by raising your cooking level. I created these 2 jars, thanks to Kirito and I completing the quest, Naruto explained as they finished the breads quickly. If you want I can show you how to make them. Asuna was silent for a few seconds before shaking her head. Thank you, but I didn't come to this town to eat good food. Then why did you come to this town? Kirito asked with a raised eyebrow. So I can still be me. I'd rather stay the way I am than rot away at an inn back at the first town. Naruto and Kirito look at her, the former's eyes narrowing a bit when he realized why her position had not changed in the beginning. Even if I get killed by a monster, I don't want to lose to this game, to this world, no matter what. Kirito and Naruto glanced at each other before the black-haired swordsman looked down at his last piece of bread, tossing it into his mouth to finish it. I don't really want any party members to die on me while we are fighting the boss, so make sure not to die tomorrow. As long as you do the same, Kirito, Naruto replied with a nod of his head, while Asuna just sat silently in her seat. The blonde crossed his arms as he leaned back in his chair, a calculative look on her face. And about tomorrow, with a number of members in our party, we will most likely have to be a support team, a backup to take care of the minions, while the others fight the boss. What? But we can handle ourselves just fine, Asuna said in response, obviously against the thought of being on the sidelines. No, Hess right, even though we have 3 members, it is still half of the number that many of the other groups have, Kirito replied. Putting us as backups is a good strategic move for the battle tomorrow, so we should come up with tactics for the battle tomorrow. Looking back and forth between the two, Asuna let out a sigh as she realized that the two were right. Alright, so what do you guys have in mind? But that said, the 3 started to converse and plan for the battle that was to come the next day. During their planning, Kirito and Naruto had found out that Asuna had no idea about a few things when it came being in a party, such as switching, so they spent a few minutes explaining it to her, and that in turn expanded more on the best tactics for the 3 of them to handle the minions. Before any of them knew it, the skies of Anchored Sky had already gone from day to afternoon, and then quickly to night, and the town's lights were on and shining brightly. Naruto looked up at the night sky before glancing at the system's clock. Wow, we've been talking for a while, we should get some rest for tomorrow. If we stay up too long it will come back to bite us. Yeah, you're right about that, Kirito nodded before turning to look at Asuna. Do you have a place to stay for the night? Not really, I've been fighting in the dungeons and resting in the safe zones within them. I don't see any reason to go into town unless I need equipment, and even then I usually get 5 rapiers in my inventory, since their durability has its limits, Asuna replied, before finding that Naruto had grabbed onto her hand and pulled her body off of her seat, pulling off in a direction. Hey, what are you doing? Naruto flashed her a look before he continued to pull her along. It's stupid for you to have been so reckless. You're going to spend the night at our place. We got a large room at a farmer's house as a reward for completing a quest. Hold on, don't I get a say in this? The cloaked girl cried out, though her words didn't seem to reach the blonde. She turned her head to look at Kirito, who was a few feet away behind them, and saw he was shaking his head with a sigh. I won't even try. This was exactly how he was when we first met. He won't stop helping a person once he's determined. Kirito rubbed the back of his head as he remembered how pushy Naruto was on them becoming partners, even though they were both strong as solo players. The guy followed him through 2 towns and 3 dungeons before Kirito agreed to at least work with his fellow teen once. It was after that the two became really good friends. But Asuna tried in vain to free her arm from her blonde acquaintance's grasp. Oh come on, the place is great. It has an amazing view, really comfortable beds, and a relaxing bath, Naruto said as they turned a corner, passing by the town center where Diable, Kibayu and a few others were conversing. I don't care Abo. All of a sudden Asuna's movements went completely still as she registered what Naruto had said before somehow tugging him back, freeing her hand and grabbing the blonde's shoulders to give him a hard stare. Did you just say that you guys have a bath? Yes. Naruto answered hesitantly at the look she seemed to be giving him, though it was hard to tell with the cloak's hood covering the upper part of her face. Kirito mentally laughed at the scene before him, knowing from personal experience with his sister that baths were very important to women. A little while later, a pleasure-filled sigh could be heard throughout the bathroom as Asuna sunk her naked body deeper into the bathtub, stretching a little as she felt the familiar tingling of her skin, coming in contact with the heated water covering her body. This feels so good, I can't remember the last time I could enjoy myself like this. Outside the bathroom, Naruto and Kirito had small red blushes on their cheeks as they heard yet another moan escape through the closed door leading to the bathroom where their newest companion was currently residing. The two were sitting and relaxing in the room, with Kirito sitting cross-legged on his bed with his head resting in his hand, while Naruto was sitting by the windowsill, both looking away from the door with awkward looks. You just had to mention the fact that we had a bath, Kirito grumbled in his hand as he used his other hand to scroll down his menu and checked his inventory. Well, sorry, I didn't think she would this vocal about it, Naruto said before turning from the window to flash Kirito a grin, but at least she finally relaxing. She was so stiff before, I thought she would finally loosen up a bit, especially since we're going into such an important battle tomorrow. About the battle tomorrow, would you be using that? Kirito questioned as he looked up from his screen to the blonde, who silently looked down at the ground. It's a powerful item you had gotten as a reward for that special quest. Yeah, it is, but the way I got it could have been better, Naruto replied as he opened his menu and scrolled through his own inventory until he came to a specific item, the Sword of Moon. It doesn't even show a proper name or any info about it. Usually there is a description of some sort, but this time there isn't anything. The only thing it shows is its stats. It could backfire on me if I just equip an unknown item like this. That's true, but you should keep an open mind about it. This item wasn't in the beta test and could come in handy against the boss tomorrow. Kirito countered before dismissing his menu. At least think about it before we get to the boss room. Don't worry, I will. After saying that, Naruto went silent for a little bit before nodding his head and dismissing his own menu. But since we're on the topic of questioning one another, I have to ask, why did you let that guy's words get to you? It's obvious he was only saying that stuff for his own gain. He doesn't give a crap about the other players that have suffered in this game as well. I figured that, but still his words had some truth to them. As soon as Akihiko Kayaba started this death game, I have only been concerned about how the both of us were going to survive. But you've been helping out everyone we've come across, pushing them forward and motivating them. Meanwhile, I haven't done that much in comparison. Kirito looked down at his open palm before clenching it tightly. But seeing all those players at the meeting, deciding that they need to work together to complete this game, it is really something incredible. Yeah, it is pretty amazing, but you shouldn't let it get to you. Helping people is just something I like to do. Well, it wasn't a large number. During the small break periods he and Kirito had, Naruto would help out the younger, inexperienced players as much as he could. After living the life he had before the Kayaba family had took him in, Naruto could never stand by while the children was suffering and crying. The fact is that we need to have people focus on beating all 100 floors of Aincrad and get everyone out of Sao, otherwise a lot more people will die. Kirito nodded his head as he looked away from Naruto to his hands. Neither he nor Naruto said anything for a while as they thought about the situation everyone was in. Their thoughts were interrupted when they heard the door open and turned to see their last companion was walking out of the bathroom with a peaceful look on her face that was so relaxing. I almost forgot how nice baths could be. Asuna opened her eyes and noticed her teammates were staring at her. What is it? Naruto and Kirito didn't say anything as they studied her appearance, which was fully revealed to them as she had discarded the cloak she was wearing before. Asuna was a beautiful girl with long orange-brownish chestnut hair that reached past her lower back and was braided in the back, and her eyes were a bright hazel. Naruto was the first one to speak as he met her gaze. Besides the slight facial change in hair color, there isn't much of a difference between your appearance when we met the first time and what you really look like. That's because I wanted to have an appearance I was familiar with. This was the first time I played a game like this, Asuna replied while rubbing her arm with a slightly embarrassed look, before giving Naruto an annoyed look. And speaking of which, the avatar you had looked a lot different from what you do now. Well, I just went with the first thing that came to mind, Naruto said with a grin before bringing a hand up to his spiky hair. To be honest, I've always wondered what it'd look like with straight hair, rather that all these spikes never went away no matter what anyone did. He shivered a little when he remembered his mother working on his hair for almost an hour, trying anything she could think of to smooth it out before Akihiko and their father stopped her from shaving it completely. She had been a very scary woman when annoyed. What we looked like back then doesn't make much of a difference now, especially after that day. Kirito spoke up, reminding them all about how Akihiko Kayaba had revealed everyone's true selves after trapping them within the game. The silence between the three of them everyone went on for a while before the black-haired teen spoke up once again. So anyways, I think we should go over our strategy one more time before we go to bed. We have to meet up with the others tomorrow, so we should make sure we are all ready. The other two players nodded their heads in agreement as they moved to the bed Kirito was sitting on. The three of them continued their planning and confirmed that Kirito would parry the attacks of the minions they would be fighting, while Asuna would switch in and go for the kill, and Naruto would be alternating between parrying with Kirito and attacking with Asuna. They came up with several other tactics in case the first didn't work out, and soon they all went to bed. Lucky for all of them, the room they were in came with up to 4 beds, so everyone had their own bed to sleep in. Well, almost everyone. Naruto was once again sitting on the windowsill, staring out through the open window to Anchored's night sky above him where thousands of stars could be seen. The whisker-faced player raised his hand up to the sky, as if to reach out and touch one of the many stars overhead. It won't be long now, Akihiko. Tomorrow will mark the first step to completing this game and freeing everyone that has been trapped here. Naruto frowned as he clenched the raised hand into a fist. I won't lose anyone I care about to this game, brother. I will protect them, that is my promise of a lifetime. As he was caught up on his thoughts, he didn't notice that one of his two teammates wasn't exactly asleep just yet. They had heard what Naruto had said, remaining still as they heard Naruto close the window and made his way to his bed before going to sleep. They closed their eyes to fall asleep as well, one word echoing in their mind as their consciousness slipped into the peaceful state of sleep. Brother. Okay everyone, I only have thing to say, so listen up, Diable said as he stabbed his sword into the ground, looking at everyone that stood in front of him. The large group of players had gathered and made their way up the dungeon, coming to a stop as they made it in front of 2 large iron doors that led into the boss room. Let's get in there and win. Diable turned around and pushed the doors open, revealing a large dark room filled with pillars on the other side. At the very end of the room was a throne with a large red creature sitting in it with a shield on one arm and a large axe resting next to it. The creature opened its eyes as Diable and the other players entered the room, revealing 2 glowing red eyes that stared menacingly at them. This large creature was none other than Ilfang, the Kobold Lord, the first floor boss of Anchored. Once enough players entered through the door, the dark room instantly lit up and Ilfang jumped from his throne to land in front of the players before unleashing a terrifying roar. A cursor soon appeared over its head with its identification and 4 health bars. And in a flash of light 3 monsters surrounded Ilfang with maces in their hand. These were Ilfang's minions, known ruined kobold sentinels. Unlike Ilfang, only 1 health bar appeared next to their name. The large boss let out another roar, signaling for him and his minions to attack the players. Immense attack. Diable raised his sword high as he took command of the raid group, who rushed towards the charging enemy with their blades poised for attack. Digital sparks flew as enemy and players' weapons clashed. Diable continued shouting out orders to everyone of Ether, keeping the enemy at bay or going on the offensive. Squads A and C, switch. Here it comes. Squad B, block the incoming attack. Squad C, keep guarding and prepare to switch, now. Everyone else switch, draw, and prepare to attack from the side. Squads D, E and F, keep those minions off us. Diable turned towards the separate groups, specifically Kirito and Naruto. Yeah, you got it. Kirito shouted back as he dashed towards one of the approaching sentinels, swinging his sword and deflecting its attack before knocking it back. As soon as he did, he signaled the other members of his party. Now, switch. Right, let's go, Asuna. Naruto said as he rushed past Kirito with Asuna right by his side. This is the third one. Asuna stated while raising her weapon up to strike, the blade glowing green as she reared her arm back. Incredible, Shess was a beginner, and yet her speed and skills are amazing. Kirito thought to himself as he watched Naruto flip over the sentinel and swung his blade across its back, sending it closer to Asuna, who delivered the final blows to the minion's chest and destroyed it. She was so fast I could barely keep up. Kirito quickly spun around and parried an attack from another sentinel. Alright, if we continue at this rate, we'll win for sure. As Kirito said this, Naruto glanced at Ilfang, whose health bar finally reached the red zone, and the large beast discarded his weapon and shield. Something doesn't seem right. What's this feeling I'm getting? Looks like the information from the book was right after all, Kibao said as he and the other players in his group prepared themselves to finish the boss once and for all. Stand back. Diable called out as he rushed past the players towards the boss with his weapon drawn. I'll finish this myself. Kirito turned his head and looked at the running Diable with a confused look. Weren't we supposed to surround it with an entire group, so why? The black-haired beta tester stopped his thoughts when he noticed Diable look back at him with a small smile. Diable stopped in front of the boss and charged his weapon, preparing his blade to finish off the boss with one more attack, but his chances for success came to a halt as Ilfang reached behind its back and pulled out its final weapon, a large blade with a V-shape edge. That isn't a tower, Kirito said to himself as his eyes widened. That's a Nodachi. knocking away a sentinel that tried to attack him. Kirito turned to the main battle. Naruto and I were right, this is different from the beta test. Hearing what Kirito had said, Naruto quickly cut down the sentinel before shouting at the blue-haired player facing the boss, "Stop Diable, get away as fast as you can." Neither noticed that a certain cactus-haired individual had managed to hear their words over the chaos. But their warnings was too late however, as Ilfang already began his attack and leaped up toward a nearby pillar and jump wall to wall at a speed too fast for Diable to track, before stopping directly over the leader and slashed downwards. The powerful attack made contact and sent Diable flying. But Ilfang wasn't done as he charged again and unleashed another attack that Diable crashing into a pillar before landing on his back. Diable! Kibao cried out as he watched a man land hard on his back after taking that insane attack, but he didn't even get a chance to move. Ilfang landed in front of him and his party, letting out a blood-curdling roar before continuing his attack on the players. Naruto and Kirito made their way to where Diable had landed and could see that his health bar was already in the red as it continued to rapidly drop down to zero. Kirito was already on the move as he pulled out a health potion in order to heal the knight. Just what the hell were you thinking? But before Kirito could use it, Diable raised a hand and pushed the potion away, shocking both of them as he shook his head. "You both know what I was trying to do after all. The two of you were beta testers as well, weren't you?" The two were silent for a few seconds before Kirito nodded his head gravely in confirmation. "You were after the last attack bonus rare item, you were a beta tester too. Are you an idiot, ignoring the plan just to get one rare item?" Naruto questioned as he tried to figure the blue-haired man out, wondering how someone could be so selfish at a time like this. His actions could have not only put his life in danger, but the lives of everyone else both here in the boss room and in the towns. Nothing is worth the lives of everyone else here. "I know what it must look like with how greedy I look," but still Diable had a hard time speaking as the pain from the boss critical attack was getting to him, his form becoming unfocused and transparent as his health bar reached zero. "You two have to defeat the boss for everyone trapped in this game." As he spoke those final words, Diable's form was covered in a blue light and he exploded into thousands of digital shards. "Diable, despite how things turned out in the end, you still care about everyone else here," Kirito thought to himself as he thought back to when he and Naruto said goodbye to Klein, and moments that happened during the first month. "We're beta testers, but unlike me who only thought about surviving. You were like Naruto and never abandoned other players. You led everyone to this battle, and you fought brilliantly." Kirito looked over at Naruto, who stood up silently with his spiky hair covering his eyes from view. "Kirito, we've already lost one player in this battle today. I refuse to lose anymore." The blonde snapped his head up to look at the remaining players fighting Ilfang, raising the hand holding his sword. With a strong throw, Naruto discarded his sword before opening up his menu, scrolling down quickly until he came upon the Sword of Moon and selected it. A flash of light appeared in Naruto's hand as a new sword appeared with a twist of his arm until it rested on his shoulders. It looked like a large oversized katana with a rectangular bronzed tsuba with gently inward curved edges, a stylized flame pattern on the long sides, and a simple decorative slit on the short sides. The hilt's handle had a red wrapping and two light blue tassels attached to the handle's base, which was decorated with a flame design on its short sides. "Let's finish this, right?" Kirito nodded his head in agreement as he gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. Asuna moved until she was standing next to them with her own sword readied for attack. "I'll go too." "Okay," Naruto said with a determined smirk as he lifted the large sword off his shoulders. "We're going with the tactic we used against the sentinels." Kirito nodded his head in understanding. "Got it. Well, follow your lead," Asuna replied. "Alright, let's go you two," Naruto exclaimed before dashing at Ilfang with Asuna and Kirito right at his sides. The large boss took notice to the three running towards him before bringing his sword down in a ready position and activating its skill, unleashing it at them with a powerful swing. "I don't think so," Naruto shouted before spinning his new sword until it was pointing towards the ceiling and activated his own skill to counter Ilfang's. The recoil of the two large blades clashing caught Ilfang off guard and opened him up for Kirito to commence his attack with an upward swing skill, knocking Ilfang off his feet. Asuna was the next one to attack as she brought her arm back, her sword glowing brightly as she got close to the falling monster. But before her attack could hit Ilfang, the beast recovered and swung its sword at Asuna, causing Kirito and Naruto's eyes to widen as the large blade drew closer to her head. "Asuna." Naruto's warning caught Asuna's attention as she ducked her head down and dodged Ilfang's swing completely, quickly shifting her rapier to the side before activating another skill. "Hiya." The long-haired swordswoman exclaimed as she thrusting her rapier at Ilfang's large gut sending it flying. Naruto and Kirito watched in amazement as Asuna as she swung she sword back to her side with a determined look on her face before looking back at the red monster who was already back on his feet with a roar. "S coming back," Kirito shouted as he started running forward and blocked Ilfang's attack, to which Naruto and Asuna attacked the parried monster at the same time and made its health bar drop even further. This strategy continued several times as Ilfang's health was nearly gone now with only a few more hits remaining. but as Kirito raised his sword to parry the large boss no dachi, the beast changed the direction of his sword just as they were about to connect and swung it at Kirito's side. Damn it. Kirito. Naruto shouted as he saw Ilfang's blade get closer to his friend. Time seemed to slow down as he raised his sword with both hands and ran in front of Kirito to block the incoming attack. The two large blades met, and the force of the blow sent Naruto and Kirito flying back until they collided with Asuna, sending all three of them onto the floor. "Naruto, are you okay?" Kirito questioned with a scared look as he and Asuna sat up to look at the blonde, who shook his head a bit as his health bar dropped a little. The small drop relieved them both, as they were glad to see that their friend didn't get too much damage. "I'm fine," Naruto replied while turning his head to look down at his sword, and he was surprised to see that it had a soft glow covering its blade. "What is thaw?" Naruto halted his thoughts, as he and others noticed a shadow on top of them, looking up to see Ilfang standing over them with its sword raised above its head, with no time to think in their minds. Asuna and Kirito held their swords up to protect the three of them from Ilfang's attack, but just as Ilfang was about to bring his no daichi down, a beam of green light slammed into the large weapon, and a Gil appeared over them with his axe in front of him full swing. His parry had successfully sent the Kobold Lord back. Members of Agil's party let out battle cries as they ran past the dark-skinned man, who turned his head to look at them. "Well, hold this asshole back until you get your health back up." "You got it, thanks," Naruto replied with a smile before taking an offered potion from Kirito and drank most its contents, restoring his health completely. Standing up with a bit of a stain, Naruto swung his sword a few times. "What's this feeling I'm getting from my sword? It feels like a sword skill, but it's different. Are you okay, Naruto? How could you do something so stupid?" Kirito asked as he stood up with his friend. Asuna stared at Naruto for a second before nodding her head. "I agree with Kirito, I'm glad you're alright." Naruto rubbed the back of his head with his other hand. "Don't worry guys, I'm fine. Anyway, let's finish that thing once and for all." As they turned back to the battle, they saw that Ilfang had knocked all of the players away before jumping into the air with its sword over its back. The glow around Naruto's sword grew brighter as he ran towards the battlefield and leaped into the air. "I don't think so." With a front flip, Naruto dodged Ilfang's attack and sliced down from above, striking it in the back and sending the boss crashing into the ground. Naruto soon landed on his feet before once again running at Ilfang's down form. "This thing is on its last legs, we're beating this thing once and for all." Kirito shouted as he and Asuna made it to either side of Naruto with their swords ready. "You got it." Asuna nodded her head as she brought her arm back. "Let's end this in one last attack," Naruto exclaimed while raising his sword over his shoulder as he continued to run. The three let out a unified shout as they charged at Ilfang, who got back onto its feet and had the no dachi high in the air. With a powerful swing, Kirito knocked the blade away and out of Ilfang's hand, but the beast didn't have any time to react as Asuna unleashed a skill that sent multiple jabs into its stomach. Taking a step back, Ilfang tried to gain its bearings and reached for its blade that was still in the air, but Naruto jumped up and swung his sword across Ilfang's arm before its hand could grab the sword, cutting it off completely. The boss let out a pain-filled roar, which was all Kirito and Naruto needed before they went in for the kill and used the strongest sword skills they could. Kirito's attack started from the bottom, while Naruto's sword made contact from above, and the two slashes continued until a diagonal cross formed from their attacks and sent Ilfang flying. The two cuts glowed brightly before the glow covered Ilfang's entire body, and seconds later the first floor boss of Aincrad exploded into millions of data shards. As first no one said anything, all of them needing a moment to comprehend what they just saw, but soon time caught up to them and they started to cheer. High above the players, the large word congratulations shined brightly as many of the players received their rewards of either leveling up, items they won, or the kernel distribution. A little away from the crowd, Naruto and Kirito were panting hard from the exhausting battle, the former using his large blade to hold himself up from falling to his knees like his companion had. Opening his eyes, Naruto noticed that the room had gotten darker to symbolize the defeat of the boss, but his attention was on two screens that suddenly appeared in front of him. The first seemed to be a level up chart, but this one was different from his. "Congratulations on Awakening's Anjetsu LV1, this sword will get stronger as you do and change once you have obtained certain requirements." Naruto was surprised at that, a sword that actually leveled up and would continue to get stronger. The blonde shook his head before looking at the other screen. "You got one of the two attack bonuses, bonus item. Code of Dawn." Looking to the side, he could see that Kirito had also acquired a last attack bonus, and from what he could see, the item Kirito had gotten was called the Code of Midnight. Kirito turned to look at him, and the two stared at each other for a few seconds before they both grinned and bumped the back of their fists. "Good job you two." The two turned to see that it had been Asuna who had congratulated them and nodded back in thanks. The Gil walked up next to Asuna with an impressed smile, looking down at the two who had defeated the boss together. "All of you were great, that was some fine swordsmanship." His gaze shifting from the three players players before resting his gaze on Naruto, who was breathing deeply while leaning on his incredibly large sword, and Kirito, who was kneeling on the ground while panting. "Congratulations. The day's victory is all thanks to you two." Behind Agil and Asuna, many of the players applauded in agreement, but the celebratory mood was cut short by a certain cactus-haired man. "Stop cheering." Kibeyu shout from his spot on the ground a ways back, sitting in the exact spot where Diable had died with his party members standing around him. "Why did you do it? Why did you let Diable die? Let him die." Kirito repeated in confusion as he and Naruto stared back. "That's what I said," Kibeyu retorted with a few tears. "Admit it. You knew the techniques that boss was gonna use. If Yao'd told us about that up front, he wouldn't have died." After Kibeyu said that, several whispers broke among the crowds as some players looked around suspiciously. They must have been beta testers. One of the players next to Kibeyu shouted as he pointed at them accusingly. "That's why they knew all the boss attack patterns. They knew but didn't tell us." And that blonde one also suddenly brought out that giant sword that defeated the boss so easily. "There are more of you beta testers here too, right? Come out and reveal yourselves." Once again the crowds began whispering and looking around suspiciously, but now they all were suspecting each other of beta testers and losing all the trust that had been building up till now. Kirito grits his teeth as he watched how everyone was acting. "This is bad, at this rate. Why did that guy have to start things now? Just when everything was starting to go so well," Naruto thought with a frown. "You two have to defeat the boss for everyone trapped in this game." Diable's words rang through their minds before they looked at each other, and then at the bonus item screens that were still open. Kirito swallowed hard as he reached up and closed his screen, coming to a decision as he stood up, but as he turned around he saw that Naruto was already walking towards the crowd. "Calm down man," Agil started to say as he stood in front of Kibeyu, but the sound of laughter could be heard. "Ha ha 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 ha." Everyone turned to see Naruto walking towards them with an amused look on his face. "You must be stupid. Don't go comparing me to beta testers. Those guys were complete newbies that cold to even level up right." What did you say?" Kibeyu took a step back as Naruto's grin grew. "You heard me, they were complete amateurs. All of you have done much better jobs than they did. But unlike those guys I made it to higher floors during the beta testing well, me and my partner Kirito." Naruto smirked as he motioned to the black-haired teen who moved until he was standing next to his best friend. A dark expression grew on Kirito's face as he stared at the crowd. "Naruto's right. The reason that we know the boss skills is because we both fought monsters with similar skills on the floors way beyond this one. There are a lot more that we know as well. More details and secrets than any information broker can give you." What? That's way worse than a beta tester. "You're a fucking cheater." Kibao shouted as he glared at Naruto and Kirito. "Yeah? Cheaters. They're beta testers and cheaters. They're beaters." Kirito smiled as he turned away from the crowd. "Huh, so we're beaters now, huh? I actually like it." Naruto let out a chuckle as he opened his menu before going to his equipment option. Next to him Kirito was doing the same. "That's right, from now on the two of us are beaters. So don't compare us with the other beta testers," Kirito said as he and Naruto equipped their newly rewarded coats. Kirito's coat of midnight was completely black, except for the shoulder blades which was a dark brown, while Naruto's cloak of dawn was a neon orange with crimson flames at the ends of his sleeves. Naruto and Kirito both smirked as they walked past the stunned crowd of players and towards the stairs leading to the next floor. As they neared the door leading to floor 2, a familiar voice called out to them, "Wait, Kirito, Naruto." The two turned around and saw that Asuna was standing several feet behind them, looking up at them with a serious expression. "Asuna, is something the matter?" Naruto said as he spun around to look at her fully. "Why did you two say all those things? I know you both are not as heartless as you acted." It was Kirito who answered her as he turned his body in her direction. "As long as players suspect and discriminate beta testers, no one will ever be able to beat this game. Thanks to what Naruto and I said, the remaining beta testers will be safe from harassment and keep their dignity. The two of us will shoulder all that hatred until Aincrad has been defeated." Asuna looked down at the ground for a few seconds before looking up with a smile, surprising the two as she let out a giggle. "I figured as much. I guess that's just how you two are. You'll become really strong, Asuna," Naruto said as he moved in front of her and patted her on her shoulders, before taking a step back and summoning the menu. "If someone you trust invite you to join a guild, don't turn them down. There is a big limit of what you can do as a solo players." "But what about you and Kirito? It will only be the two of you," Asuna replied as she watched Naruto bring up the party option. Naruto looked down at the selection before pressing the disband button, breaking up a three-man party before walking back up to Kirito. As he made it to Kirito's side he turned and flashed Asuna a smile. "We'll be fine. Kirito and I are used to it. See you later, Asuna. Don't hesitate to message me if you need anything." "Yes, see ya," Asuna muttered as she watched the two open the doors to floor 2 and disappear into the next area, taking the first steps towards beating the game and escaping from Sword Art Online. Half a year had passed since the start of Sword Art Online, and 5 months since Naruto and Kirito had defeated the first floor boss. Thanks to that first victory, many players players went to the front lines and worked hard to complete the death game they were trapped in. Many guilds had been formed in that time, such as the Knights of the Blood and the Holy Dragon Alliance. But even during all the chaos and the completion of the 25th floor, Naruto and Kirito continued to fight and advance side by side, both determined to get to the top floor together, or rather, that had been their original plan. It was April 8, 2023, and Kirito was in the main settlement of the 11th floor known as Taft, but he wasn't alone. 5 people were standing around a large table that he was sitting at, with their silver cups raised high. "Here's to the moonlit black cats." One of the 5, a blonde-hair male, said with a smile, he wearing a black beanie that covered the top of his head, except for a few large bangs of hair, a yellow shirt with a gray chest plate over it and brown pants, and draped over his shoulders was an orange cloak that reached his knees, and most importantly, here's to Kirito, the person who saved our lives. Cheers. Cheers. The other 4 said together with smiled on their faces as they looked at the black-haired player. "See, cheers," Kirito said awkwardly, since unlike Naruto he was not used of being with many people. The thought of the blonde made the teen look down at the table with a sad look on his face, but he was quickly snapped out of it when the others started talking. "You really saved us back there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much." "Oh, no, it was nothing," Kirito said while waving his hand in a dismissive manner. The black coat he had started off with had been replaced with another that had blue linings spread out over the arms and flaps, and his clothing was black underneath, with a silver chest plate covering his torso. "I was really scared." The next one to speak was the only girl in the group. Her hair was black, and she had green eyes with a birthmark right under her right eye. She was wearing a blue armor with a light blue clothing underneath, a pair of white long gloves and a blue skirt. The girl reached up and wiped some of her tears from her eye as she spoke. "I was really glad when you came and saved us." Sure. Mr. Kirito, sir, a brown-haired male, who Kirito had found out was named Kita, knelt down closer to Kirito, making the seated swordsman look up at him. Kita was wearing a full-set iron armor with crimson shirt inside and a black pant. "I know this is really rude to ask, but what level are you?" Kirito looks away from Kita towards his health bar and stared quietly at the word LV40 under that was under it, lifting up his drink awkwardly before answering, "Level 20, but I'm leveling up soon." That isn't too far from us. It's really amazing since you're a solo player." "Kita, you don't need to be so polite. Being solo means that I can only target isolated enemies or small groups. It isn't that efficient," Kirito replied as he looked up at the leader of the group before looking away, "and to be honest, I wasn't by myself until recently. I had a friend with me." It made everyone at the table look down towards the ground sadly before Kita spoke up. Oh, I see. I'm sorry for your loss." "Huh? Oh, no. Hess not dead." Kirito spoke up while waving his hands in front of him in a dismissive manner. "We just decided to go our separate ways for a bit." "I see, so then Kirito, this might be out of nowhere. What would you think about joining our guild? And your friend too if he ever comes by?" Kita asked, making Kirito look at him in surprise. "The only one that we have as a vanguard is our mace user, Tetsuo, the leader of the guild," pointed to a tall purple-clothed member with an iron breastplate who waved his hand at being mentioned and then started patting the female player next to him. "This is Sachi. I was planning on having her switch to sword and shield wielder so she could help fight on the front lines, but the main problem is that she said she isn't really sure, so do you think that if you can show her the ropes if you join us?" "Come on, don't talk to me like I'm useless," Sachi said as she moved to the side a step out of Kita's hand reach. "Seriously, anyone would get scared at suddenly being made to go out and fighting in the front. Just hide behind your shield," Tetsuo said. Kita let out a laugh. "You've always been a scaredy cat." "Ooh." Sachi puffed her cheek at that remark, to which everyone else in her guild laughed at her expression. "Everyone from our guild is from our school's PC research club in the real world," Kita explained to Kirito before flashing him a smile. But don't worry, I'm sure you will fit in no problem. We already consider a part of us, right guys?" Kirito watched as the others nodded their heads at what their leader said before he silently lowered his head, thinking the offer very hard given to him. In the past he had never been one to be a part of a large group. It had always been Naruto who seemed to gain friends and allies wherever they went. Kirito had always been one to do things himself, so the chance to find others who could understand him was a definite bonus. But then again there was also the chance that they could die. If Naruto were here, he would probably jump at the chance. Kirito quickly shook his head as he dismissed his thoughts on the blonde swordsman. This was his decision to make. After a long silence, Kirito finally spoke up as he looked at them with a weak smile. "Okay then, you can count me in, thanks for having me." Once he said those words the group smiled and cheered, gathering around the black-haired teen. The players celebrated the newest member to join the Moonlit Black Cats, and their laughter could be heard throughout the room, Kirito being the center of attention with a small smile on his face. Meanwhile outside the restaurant, a young male figure wearing an orange coat could be seen standing next to the window of the building, with his back leaning against the wall. Like Kirito, Naruto had also kept the orange coat theme to his appearance, except there were no flames on it. Instead there was a large black circle on the middle of his back with thick black linings that connected from the circle towards two lines that stretched down the coat's arms. Naruto stepped off the wall and took a step forward before glancing through the window to see Kirito surrounded by his new guild with a smile on his face. After a few seconds Naruto turned around with a small frown and started walking away from the building, letting out a sigh before placing his hands in his pockets as he walked down the streets. I hope everything will turn out okay for you, Kirito. 1 month later, on floor 24, in a clearing with a weeping forest dungeon that was a good distance away from town, a small party of 4 male players stood with their weapons ready with exhausted looks on their faces as they watched the tree branches rustle and could hear something heavy make their way towards them. A large brown claw emerged from the forest and slammed into the ground in front of the players, making one of them take a step back in fear as he could see red eyes gleaming through the shadows. It just keeps coming. Damn it. Just how much is it going to take to kill this thing? This is bad, we don't have any more healing crystals. The monster emerged from the trees with a loud roar, revealing its true form to be a tree-like monster, with several bulky branches coming out of its back and 2 bulky legs that had 3 blue and silver colored mushrooms where its toes would be. The branches were moving around threateningly in the air as it towards over the 4. The cursor appeared over the monster's head with the name Whomping Willow and a single health bar that was not even than halfway gone. The players readied their weapons as the branches over the Whomping Willow's head rose a little higher into the air and wrapped together into one large before descending in order to smash them all at once. Don't just stand there. The voice called out from behind them, causing 2 of the players to turn their heads to see an orange blur rush past them and slam into the large branch. The party was surprised when the blur was revealed to be a blonde-haired teen with an orange coat, wielding what looked like an oversized kyber knife that was as big as he was. It didn't have a guard and instead of a proper hilt was instead a cloth-wrapped hang. But that wasn't what surprised them. What really surprised them was that the teen had used his sword to cut the large branch with ease, which caused the tree monster to let out a painful roar as it swung a claw at him, only for the blonde to sidestep the attack and cut the wooden arm off, making the Whomping Willow take a step back from the counterattack dealt to it. Whoa, a player's mouth dropped as he watched the blonde land in front of him. Wait. Who are you? The name's Naruto, but never mind that now. Naruto didn't take his eyes off the monster as it narrowed its eyes at him, but that didn't seem to faze the player as he pointed his blade at the Whomping Willow. Want some more? I can guarantee that my Zangetsu is enough of a challenge. The monster went silent as it stared down at the smirking blonde before bending its knees and leaping into the trees behind it. Naruto watched silently as it camouflaged itself within the forest. Meanwhile the players were warily scanning the area around them. The leader of the party gripped the hilt of his mace tightly before speaking. This is what it kept doing whenever we injured it. It can get the drop on us from anywhere thanks to its sneak attack ability. No, it won't. Naruto's eyes began to glow green as he activated the skill track and scanned the forest surrounding the clearing, while moving the grip he had on his sword to the extra cloth coming off of his sword. The players watched as Naruto jerked his hand with the cloth and to their shock, started to spin his sword. I can see you over there. With another jerk of his hand, Naruto sent his sword flying into the trees to the right of them, causing several trees to fall over, followed by the sound of the sword connecting with something. A smirk grew on Naruto's face before tightening the grip on the cloth. It's not good to hide during a battle, so why don't you get over here? Where the Whomping Willow came crashing into the clearing with Naruto's weapon stuck in its chest with the health bar above it, showing that the monster's health was now in the red. Naruto pulled on the cloth and made his sword return to his hand before placing it over his shoulders. In the last-ditch effort the monster started running at Naruto with its remaining claw in the air, bringing it down at Naruto, who raised his sword with one hand and blocked the tree-like beast from land a blow. The monster let out a growl as the wooden fingers extended and tried to wrap around the sword, only for Naruto to twist the blade and snap the branches with ease before moving his leg back to activate a martial art skill that caused his leg to glow gold, unleashing the skill into a powerful axe kick that collided with the monster's chin and sent it hovering into the air. Now to finish this. Spinning his body to adjust himself, Naruto raised Zangetsu high before cutting the monster directly in the middle, and seconds later made it shatter into digital shards, turning his body towards the party he had just saved. Naruto saw that the 4 of them had collapsed to the ground as the adrenaline all of them had worn off. Are you guys alright? The leader of the group nodded his head as he took in a deep breath before answering, why yeah, though I don't know we survived that. That was incredible. You took that thing down like it was nothing. Another player said as he stared at Naruto in awe. You really saved us, thank you, a third player said with a tired smile. It was nothing, Naruto replied with a smile of his own before positioning Zangetsu near his back, to which the cloth coming from the hilt extended and wrapped itself around the blade until it was completely covered. Once that was done, Naruto placed the sheath weapon against his back and a red chain appeared to hold the large blade in place. I'm just glad to see that you all are alive. Yeah, but by the grit of our teeth, this quest was harder than I thought, the leader replied, making Naruto place a hand on his hip. So you guys were on the Weeping Whomping Mushrooms quest, Naruto deduced with a smile before opening his menu, making members of the party look at him in confusion. After pressing a few buttons, several of the mushrooms that had been on the monster's feet appeared in his hands. These were the reward for defeating the monster, so that means they belong to you. That surprised a group in front of him, and seconds later the leader spoke up, but you were the one who defeated it, not us, why would you give us the reward? I don't really have a reason to keep them, Naruto said with a shrug, which was true, since he had already completed the quest a while back with Kirito. Great. Now he was feeling depressed, shaking his head a few times. The blonde continued to speak, beside it, doesn't matter if I defeated the Whomping Willow or you did, as long as you got the mushrooms to bring back to the town. Walking forward, Naruto placed the mushrooms in the hands of one of the players, before turning around and started walking away. With your health bars so low, I suggest you use your teleportation crystals. Get back to the town. The players watched Naruto walk away until the blonde seemed to fade into the darkness of the trees, which was surprising since he was wearing a large orange coat. After a few seconds the four made it to their feet and teleported out of the area, leaving a smiling Naruto behind as he continued to make his way through the forest until he made it to one of the dungeon safe zones. Naruto turned his head to see Klein leaning against a tree with his arms crossed, a smirk on the retard's face as he looked at Naruto. When I sent that message for us to meet up after so long, I didn't think you would suggest us meeting in a dungeon area. Sorry, but I had a feeling something might happen to a party. After hearing them talk about taking on the quest in this area, thought I would keep an eye on them before coming here, Naruto replied with a grin before walking up to Klein, who raised his fist up to meet Naruto's in greeting. Great to see you, Klein, samurai outfit really works for you. Well, what can I say, I make this look. Holy crap. Klein exclaimed when his gaze fell on the sword strapped to Naruto's back, taking a step back as he took in its size. Where the hell did you get that thing? Wait, is that Zangetsu? Naruto's grin grew as he looked back at his sword. Yeah, it happened a week ago after the recent battle with the floor boss. Apparently Zangetsu changes its appearance once it reaches a certain level to unleash even more of its power. Man, I still can't get over how lucky you were in getting that thing. I mean, a sword that not only levels up, but can evolve into a more powerful version of itself. Klein whistled while placing his hands on his hips. Sure lucky. Naruto looked away with a frown on his face as he thought back to how he had gotten Zangetsu. It was 2 weeks after the start of the game, and Naruto had just finished a quest that he had taken alone since Kirito was handling a quest by himself. As he was returning to the inn where the two of them were staying, Naruto had gotten a mysterious message about a special quest for an ultra-rare item had been unlocked. He and Kirito had met up and hesitantly decided to go on the quest, both fully prepared with items in hand and their guards up. It wasn't until the end of their quest that several King beta testers had shown up to kill the two and take the item for themselves. A horde of monsters had shown up and killed the attempted murderers, but luckily for Kirito and Naruto, they had made their escape before the monsters turned their attention onto them. Noticing the look on his friend's face, Klein rubbed the back of his head before deciding to change the subject. So anyway, how about we head back into town and get caught up? I have some info that I think y'all be interested in. Info? Naruto blinked a few times with a raised eyebrow. Come on, you asked me to keep an eye on Kirito, since you cold. Klein placed his hands on his hips as he gave the blonde a stern look. Speaking of which, you are going to need to explain to me what happened between the two of you. It's complicated, are you sure you want to know? Haha, as if you could say anything that would shock me. What? Klein shouted as shock took over his body as he stared at Naruto with wide eyes and a nearly dislocated jaw from how far it dropped. The two were currently in an empty alleyway, Naruto sitting on a crate across from a standing Klein. After making sure that the area was secure, Naruto told Klein everything about his past, including him being adopted by the Kayaba family after losing his legs. Keep it down. I don't want anyone I don't trust to find out about this, Naruto said in a hushed tone, while looking at the alleyway entrances where people were walking by, one person glancing inside as he passed. Sorry. Klein shook his head before taking a step forward, but wow, just wow, you're not kidding about this, are you? No, as if I could joke about something like this in the real world. I'm Akihiko, Kayaba's younger brother, Naruto explained before quickly continuing as he figured what the bandana-wearing man was going to say next. My brother has never done any interviews on his personal life, so not a lot of people even know he has a brother, let alone an adopted one who is in a wheelchair. I guess that explains why you were picked to become a beta tester, huh? Naruto looked down at his hand sadly before nodding his head. Yeah, Akihiko had asked me personally to try it out, and everything seemed so incredible the first time I used it, having the ability to walk again, the wind blowing in my face when I ran, being able to fight monsters and make friends. It was out of this world, but as soon as he turned this game into the monstrosity that it is now, I knew that it would be better to keep our connection a secret, and it wasn't like I had any secret information or anything besides what I learned from playing the beta with Kirito. So is that why you guys went your separate ways? When I had saw the guy I knew he was still affected by what happened, but when I asked about you he just went quiet. Klein let out a sigh as he recalled his encounter with Kirito the other night and finding out that the black swordsman had joined a guild without Naruto. I don't think it's because he hates you or anything now that he knows your secret, Hess not like that kind of guy. I know, but Hess probably a little mad that Hess' best friend and someone he trusted so much would be hiding a secret like this, but since we had been through so much already Naruto turned his head to the side as he hands clenched into tight fists. I didn't think I should have continued hiding it from him, but the tension began to build between us and I could see that some of the trust he had for me had wavered so the two of us went our separate ways, or at least he did. Despite what he thinks of me now I don't want him to die, so I've been keeping tabs on him from time to time. I see, well I'm sure everything will work out between the two of you. Ever since the first floor, the two of you have been an unstoppable team, Klein said with a grin, making Naruto nod at the Reti's words. We'll just have to see, I'm pretty sure Hess already moving on with that group of his. Man, I probably already know the answer to this, but I have to ask, did you know what your brother was planning on doing back then? Klein asked with his arms crossed as he stared at the blonde in front of him, trapping everyone in the game. I mean, of course not. Naruto exclaimed as he rose to his feet, slamming the palm of his hand against his chest. If I had known back then, if I had even the slightest idea I would've tried to stop him. Do you really think you could've done something? Naruto sadly looked away with an exhale. I may not have my legs, but there's no way I'd let something like this happen. The fact that I wasn't able to see it is bad enough. Okay then, so what's your next move with Kirito? What that's all you have to say? Naruto questioned with a shocked expression. Klein rubbed the back of his head. Trust me, there are a lot of things going through my mind, but despite this new info I can't say I look at you any different. I mean you're the younger brother of the guy who trapped us in here, but you're also trapped in here just like us. Naruto blinked several times as he continued to listen to his bandana wearing friend. It is easy for anyone to see that you're a person who is kind and cares about others. Ever since this crap began you have done nothing but help everyone you can, including my group, even while you were working hard yourself. But Klein, look, you said that you had no idea what your brother had in mind when he created this game. To me that's the important thing. Klein grinned before patting Naruto on the shoulder. I'll keep this a secret from the other players until you decide to tell them yourself. Thanks, you're a great friend, Naruto replied with a bright smile. Seeing that the game systems had already started changing the day sky to night, the two walked out of the alleyway and walked along the path to meet up with Klein's friends at a restaurant for dinner. As the two walked past several stores that were starting to light up and NPCs that were emerging from several restaurants, Klein turned his head to look at Naruto as another thought came to mind. So besides me and Kirito, who else knows about your secret? Well, at the moment there are two other people that know. The first is a really cool guy named Agil. Remind me to introduce the two of you, and the other is actually a former beta tester like me. Her name is Argo. Naruto listed off as he looked up at the now dark sky, while placing his hands into his pockets. That last name sounds familiar. Is she cute? Naruto raised an eyebrow as he looked at Klein. Is that really all you think about when you hear a girl's name? Anyway, she is an information dealer that will sell all sorts of information for a price. Kirito and I go to her, since she is the best at getting the most accurate. Some people call her the rat. Now I know why that name sounded familiar. I was thinking of going to see her in the future for some info on a certain quest. Now that I know that you and Kirito seem to trust her, that means her merchandise is worth the hefty prices I heard she has. Naruto blinked a few times before tilting his head to the side. Hefty prices. She charges me like 100 or less depending on the info. Now that I think about it, whenever Kirito and I go to meet up with her, Argo would always charge Kirito more for the information when he was the one doing the purchase than she would with me. I wonder why. Weird. I think it's pretty obvious why, Klein thought before letting out an angry huff and wrapping his arm tightly around Naruto's neck, catching the orange cloaked player by surprise at the sudden action. You lucky bastard. Hey Klein. Let go. Naruto shouted as he struggled against the tight grip around his neck. What are you talking about? There's no way you're that dense. Dense about what? Never mind that, just get off me. Why don't you make me? You're just lucky we're in a safe zone. Despite the confusion he felt at the moment from his friend's actions, Naruto couldn't help but smile to himself. It was nice to know that even if he might possibly become the target for all the remaining players' hatred once they found out who he was, he would still have friends that would stay by his side. An image of a certain black-haired swordsman flashed through his mind after he thought that, and the smile dimmed a little. Kirito, I won't turn my back on you, because even with all this, you are still my best friend. Fate Moonlit Black Cat's headquarters. Kirito was deep in thought as he was sitting on his bed while scrolling through his menu. His earlier conversation with Sachi in his mind. There are lots of players like Sachi who are afraid of dying, but they cry, laugh, and live as best as they can in this world. That's why we have to finish this game, one way or another. I refuse to let anyone die in front of me. If I can help someone innocent to survive this game, then I will do whatever I can. I suppose now I can understand what Naruto was thinking when he helped all those people back then. Kirito mused as he looked back at his messages to see that Kita had sent him a confirmation about Kirito's message about finding Sachi and not asking about where she went. That guy always like helping the weaker players out, guess him not that different now, huh? The sound of knocking could be heard against his door, making Kirito dismiss his menu before turning around. Come in. The door opened revealing Sachi carrying a pillow and wearing a white sleeping gown. Kirito blinked in confusion at the girl's presence. I'm sorry, I just cold get to sleep, I was wondering if we could talk for a bit. Blinking a few times, Kirito nodded his head. Sure, I don't have a problem with that. Thank you. Sachi softly closed the door behind her and made her way towards the bed, sitting next to Kirito with her pillow still in her hands. Listen Kirito, I wanted to say thank you for before. Back in the sewers, for encouraging me when I was scared and listening to my problems. You don't need to worry about it. Kirito averted his gaze from the girl while scratched the back of his head. Though I'm probably not the best at that kind of thing, Naruto was always the better person for that. Naruto, is that the friend you were talking about back then when you first joined? Sachi asked as she tilted her head to the side. Until now you haven't really mentioned him, well besides a few side comments to yourself. You heard those, huh? To tell you the truth, I've been trying not to think about him that much, but the guy really rubbed off on me, Kirito replied with a small smile. Sachi quietly watched Kirito for a while before speaking up. Did something really bad happen between the two of you to make you go your separate ways? The reason why is a little complicated. To put it simply, I found out something about him that made things really tense. I trusted him, and I guess I still do even if it's shaken a bit now. Heck, I still consider the guy my best friend, but I suppose that's just the kind of person he is. Kirito let out an amused chuckle as he thought about his old teammate. Can you tell me what he's like? It might make things clearer if you talked about it, Sachi said while placing a hand on Kirito's shoulder. Kirito glanced at the girl before looking forward. When I first met Naruto, it was a little after I finished a quest on the first floor. Both of us were solo players, and he was in the same area as me. We talked for a bit, and he asked me to form a party with him. There was no motive behind it or anything either. The guy just wanted to become friends. Back then I wanted to be alone, so I declined his offer. But that didn't seem to stop him as he followed me around and continued to try to be my friend. It was a week before I relented, mostly because the guy had grown on me. Sachi watched the smile on Kirito's face grow as he recounted on how he and his friend had met, but then again that's who Naruto is. Never giving up and making friends wherever he goes. His positive outlook on things and his desire to help people can be a pain at times, but at the same time I can't but envy that about him. You've got a wonderful personality too, Kirito, Sachi stated with a smile before placing a hand on Kirito's, making the black-haired teen turn to look at her. It's because of your kindness that you saved us back then, and why we are still around now. Yeah, I suppose so, Kirito replied with a low voice as his thoughts went back to what Sachi had said before. I'm no different from Naruto in keeping others safe, despite the fact that I'm keeping secrets from them. Hey Kirito? Sachi spoke up. Yeah? Do you miss him, your friend I mean? Sachi laid her head on the pillow against her chest as she looked away from the male player, who looked down at his hands quietly. From what you've told me, I'm sure he still wants to be friends with you, regardless of how things ended up. Maybe if we see him on the later floors, we could invite him to join us. Maybe, we'll see. Shaking his head a few times to clear his thoughts, Kirito turned to the lights of the room and summoned a menu. It's getting late, we should turn in for the night. Alright, the lights in the room turned off, and the two laid down in the bed with their backs facing each other, silence hovering over the room as the two stared at their respective walls. Kirito, turning his body to see that Sachi was looking at him, Kirito flashed her a smile before speaking. Don't worry, I promise you're going to survive. Thank you. A smile grew on the girl's face as she closed her eyes and tried to fall asleep. Kirito's smile slowly dropped when he saw that she had fallen asleep and looked towards the ceiling, lifting a hand up and clenching it tightly. As long as I am part of this guild, I'll protect them. Floor 49. Mugian. Several months had passed and already a year had officially passed for all the players trapped in the death game. It was the day before Christmas, and despite the circumstances all of the players were enjoying themselves, taking in the snow and holiday themes decorating the different floors of Aincrad. Many players were amazed with the details put into the decorations and the special items in shops that were only available during this time of year. Well, except for the players that were focused on the holiday events taking place. One player was currently running past the crowds of players and making their way towards the town square, where a large tree was located, humming to a stop when they saw a familiar cloaked figure sitting on one of the benches in front of it. Argo. The figure perked her head up to reveal a girl with blonde hair and 3 red marks on each cheek, a serious expression on her face when she saw who it was. Hey Naruto, she greeted as he walked up to the bench, crossing his arms as he stopped in front of her. Naruto spoke up, that message you sent me sounded pretty important. What's up? Got some info? Something like that. Kirito was here a little while ago. He came by to review some information on a first-time event. Hess been doing some crazy leveling up lately, and I think Hess going to try it solo, Argo explained, making Naruto freeze up before narrowing his eyes. An event? Tell me everything you know. Naruto clenched his hands into tight fists as his thoughts went to Kirito. A few months back, Naruto had heard that the Moonlit Black Cats guild that Kirito had been a part of had all died except for Kirito. The blonde had tried to talk to his friend about it, but Kirito seemed to block everything out. As if he was numb to the world around him unless it involved fighting or getting items, completely ignoring Naruto on numerous occasions when he tried to talk to him, and going solo for the past few months. A lot of their friends were worried about Kirito's well-being, and were wondering if he was on a suicide run. Because this wasn't in the beta test, I can't say much, but supposedly the event boss known as Nicholas the Renegade will appear beneath a certain fir tree, Argo explained before shrugging her shoulders. A rumor going around though is that it's supposed to drop an item that can bring back a dead player. Because of this, the big league guilds are searching really hard for it. An item that could bring back the dead, huh? I'm guessing Kirito is going to go after it, Naruto deduced while closing his eyes in thought. Kirito, if he really is going to try this alone, then he might die. But for there to be a revival item in my brother's game, there must be a catch. That's right, I think he knows where the tree is, Argo answered as she watched Naruto spin around and start to walk away. And I'm guessing you do too. You know he might not want anything to do with you at the moment. There was a look of utter defeat in his eyes, like he has no plans on coming back. Maybe so, but that means shit to me, Naruto said back before summoning his menu and scrolling down to the message board. I'm going to find him and hopefully knock some sense into him. He'll need to get some help though, I just hope they aren't too busy. Okay, it should be around here somewhere. Kirito was walking through the snow-covered grass of the 49th floor's forest area, decked out in a winter black coat with a stronger sword strapped to his back. He came to a stop and looked up from the map in his hands to see a giant pine tree in distant area ahead of him, looking back down at a map in his hands. Kirito nodded to himself before putting the map away before going off into a run and passing through the new area's entrance with a flash of light. Several yards into the new area, his sensor skill picked up something to the side which made him skid to a halt and prepared himself for any signs of attack. Several flashes of light appeared in front of Kirito and faded away to reveal Klein with his guildmate standing behind him. Yo, it's been a while, Klein greeted the black-haired swordsman with a friendly wave, though the serious look on his face showed he wasn't in a completely happy mood. You followed me? Kirito questioned with a dead tone in his voice. Of course we did, Klein answered before shifting his gaze to the large tree up ahead. You're going after the revival item, Arencha. Yeah, Kirito replied while turning to face the group. Don't risk your life on a possibly bogus rumor, Klein started to say as he thought back to a while ago when Naruto had contacted him with the information on the event and that Kirito was going to try something reckless and with a request for his group to intercept Kirito before he got to the boss. You need to remember that if you die in this game, you die for real. You can't just mess around or else your HP would hit zero and in the real world your brain will. Just shut up. Kirito cut off the redeed. Klein looked at Kirito in surprise for a second before shouting back at him, even if you are at a high level, your reckless solo raids will get you killed. Join us, whoever get the dropped revival item keeps it, no hard feeling. Sorry, but if I did that then there'd be no point. Kirito looked away before he raised one of his hands to the hilt of his sword. This is something that I have to do alone. In retaliating to his actions, Klein's guild readied their weapons to prepare themselves in case the teen in front of them attacked, but Klein quickly signaled for them to stand down. I'm sorry, but I can't let you die in a place like this. You need to think about what you're doing. Believe me, I have. Kirito started to draw his sword out of his sheath before coming to a stop as various teleportation lights started to surround not only Kirito, but Klein and his guild as well. The lights went away to reveal a large group of fully equipped players with iron armors. Klein and his guildmates instantly made their way to Kirito's side and spun around putting a defensive formation. I guess you guys were followed too, huh Klein? Looks that way, Klein said with a bitter smile as he started to draw his sword, his gaze snapping down to the side when he saw a message icon appear in front of him. It's the Holy Dragon Alliance, one of Klein's friends said as he positioned his halberd in front of his body. They'll do anything for a rare item, no matter how shady or risky it might be. So what do we do? Kirito narrowed his eyes before tightening the grip on his sword, letting out a whisper as his eyes traced through the opposing players. You bastards. Screw these guys, Klein shouted before drawing his katana out of its sheath, placing both hands on it as he moved it in front of his body. Go on ahead, Kirito. Klein, but there's no way I could, Kirito started to say before he was interrupted by the bandana-wearing guild leader. Well, hold these guys off. Klein turned his head back, so get going already. After a few seconds, Kirito let go of his sword with a nod before sprinting towards the biggest pine tree behind them. Once the swordsman was out of sight, one of Klein's friends spoke up. Are you sure we should let him go? We were supposed to hold him back. He'll be fine. Klein replied with a smirk, after all I got the signal saying that he was positioned and waiting. Giant fir tree. After a few more minutes of running, Kirito made it to the glowing tree and silently stared up at it as he waited for some kind of sign that the event was about to begin. He didn't haste to wait long however, as the sounds of a Christmas bell could be heard throughout the area, which was soon followed by the sounds jingling bells. Following the sounds of the bells, Kirito looked at the sky to a trail of light soaring through the sky. So that's Kirito's view was disrupted as a giant figure appeared in his line of sight and was currently falling from the sky towards his direction. The figure landed in front of him and causing the snow surrounding it kick into the air. Kirito raised a hand to block the snow from blocking his view as he studied the event boss, which looked like a monstrous and insane version of Santa Claus, with its red eyes looking in different directions, blue-grayish skin, and its long arms connected to the axe in one of its hand. The name Nicholas the Renegade appeared over its head as 4 health bars appeared next to it, a mechanical sound coming from the monster as it moved its head to the side. "Let's do this," Kirito said, readying his sword before charging forward with a yell. "Hi." Nicholas raised its axe and swung down at Kirito, who blocked it with his sword, but the force of the attack and the snowy flooring made Kirito slide back an inch. But the monster was not done as it raised its other arm behind its back and pulled out another axe. The black swordsman's eyes widened as it started to swing its second weapon down, but it came to a halt as another blade blocked it before it could connect. The large blade glowed before pushing back against the axe and made Nicholas recoil back. What the Kirito was cut off from finishing his sentence as he felt something pull the back of his collar and him along with it, leaping back in the air before landing a few feet back with him landing on his behind. "You can be so reckless." With eyes widening at the familiar voice, Kirito turned his head to see a grinning Naruto staring straight at the monster who let out a roar, wearing an orange version of his winter coat. "I've always wanted to see Santa Claus as a kid, but I didn't think he would be this crazy. You must be on the naughty list or something, Kirito." "And Naruto? What are you doing here?" Naruto let go of Kirito's collar and walked forward with Zangetsu on his shoulders. "Isn't it obvious? I came because you were going to fight this thing by yourself and I got worried. I will always be there to help my friends when I know they need it." "But how did you know I would be Argo and Klein?" "I should have known." Kirito shook his head as he got back to his feet. "I'm guessing you know why I'm here." "Of course I do, but did you really think I would let you die against something like this? Even if this is your attempt at redemption or whatever you want to call it, I won't let you get yourself killed to do it." The smile on Naruto's face disappeared as he kept his gaze on Nicholas, who charged at them with one of his axes raised high. "I've been keeping an eye on you ever since you joined that guild, asking the others to let me know how you were doing. If you know about them, then you know that they died." Kirito shouted before running forward and parrying Nicholas' strike and countering it with a powerful slash across its chest. That didn't stop Kirito as he continued to use various attack skills in rapid succession before leaping away from Nicholas, who had lost nearly 3/4 of the first health bar. "I got arrogant and wasn't able to protect them." Naruto ran forward and leaped high into the high, dodging both of Nicholas' strikes before swinging as one of the axes with a weapon breaker skill that caused the weapon to shatter upon contact, grabbing the cloth of his sword. Naruto threw his sword into Nicholas' chest and landed behind the monster before pulling hard on the cloth, which made his blade travel up the monster's body and cause a lot of damage to the Santa Claus reject Nicholas to let out an angry roar and raised his remaining axe into the air, but that left him open for Kirito to attack again. "I didn't know about your guild until after it happened, and I am sorry for that," Naruto called out as he pulled the cloth again to make Zangetsu return to his hands. "If you're sorry, then stay out of my way. This is something I need to do alone." Kirito swung his blade upward with a roar and sent Nicholas falling back towards Naruto, who gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. "Like I said to Klein, there's no point to this, other people help me." "Idiot." Naruto shouted before slashing Nicholas back and landing next to Kirito, but he didn't continue to attack the boss. Instead, he raised one of his fists and slammed it into Kirito's cheek, sending him colliding to the ground. "Stop being so fucking stubborn." Kirito held his cheek in pain as he glared up at Naruto. "Oh, that's rich. Coming from you of all people. I may be stubborn, but I don't let my pain consume me." "And what pain could you possibly? You're not the only one who is suffering from people dying in this game. You blame yourself for the death of 5 players. Try over 2,000. Naruto shouted back, making Kirito recoil back with wide eyes as he could see tears building up in Naruto's eyes. "Because of my ignorance towards my brother's true intentions, because I didn't realize what he was planning. I wasn't able to prevent this death game from coming to be. Their blood is on my hands as much as Akihiko does." And Naruto. With a brush of his sleeve, the blonde wiped away the tears before they could truly form, before turning around to Nicholas the Renegade. "But even so, I will continue living, because if I don't, then I won't be able to face those that have died, because I stopped my brother and will end this game, freeing all the remaining player." I wish I had your resolve," Kirito said as he made it back to his feet, walking forward until he was standing next to Naruto. "Maybe after this battle I will find it, so until then, would you fight with me?" Naruto smirked as he glanced at Kirito from the corner of his eye, raising his free hand towards Kirito, in the shape of a fist, of course, because you're my best friend Kirito. Yeah, I feel the exact same. Lifting his fist up to the blonde, the two slammed their fists together, with loud yells, the two teammates ran forwards with their swords glowing through the darkness. Now, let's take this thing down. A few minutes later, Klein and his guildmates were sitting on the snowy fields, all of them exhausted from somehow managing to survive their battle with the Holy Dragon Alliance. Klein let out a heavy sigh as he leaned back against his sword, before snapping his head up when he heard the sounds of no one, but two sets of footsteps coming towards them. A smile grew on his face when he saw that Naruto and Kirito walking were towards them side by side. Ah. Kirito. Naruto. You guys made it. Klein's smile diminished when he saw the look on Kirito's face, but before he could say anything the black-haired teen tossed something towards him. The Redeed held his hands out and caught the item before looking at them in confusion. Huh. But isn't this the revival item you wanted? It is, but the thing is useless to me now, Kirito replied with a defeated look, to which Naruto placed a hand on his shoulder. What? Klein quickly opened the item's info page and skimmed through it. Let's see here, it must be administered to targeted player within 10 seconds. Be sure to use it someday if someone you care about is dying in front of you, Kirito said as he and Naruto started to walk away, but Klein quickly got to his feet and grabbed onto the back of Kirito's coat. Wait, Kirito. Naruto. The two of them looked at Klein, who had tears falling down his face as he spoke. Please, I know the two of you have been through a lot but the two of you must survive. Survive until the very end. Please. Sure, I'll try, Kirito whispered, making Klein's grip on Kirito's coat loosened, which allowed him to start walking away. Naruto quickly patted the man on the shoulder. Don't worry Klein, I promise the two of us will be fine, thanks for your help before. I'll see you guys later, Kirito called out without turning around, while Naruto waved his hand to Klein and his guild. Well, before following after Kirito, the two quietly departed from the area, the snow continuing to fall around them, while Klein looked down from the back of two players towards the item that rested in his hand before his grip on it tightened. Black Eagle in. Naruto and Kirito had made it back to the room where Kirito had been staying while he was getting prepared for the event. Despite their arrival a few minutes earlier, the room had been left dark as Naruto sat on the bed staring as a quiet Kirito, who was sitting at his desk with his head resting in his arms. Naruto closed his eyes as he let out a sigh. Kiri. He was interrupted as a message icon appeared in front of Kirito, making him the depressed teen look up at it in confusion. Kirito reached up and pressed the icon to open it. The words that popped up next took him by surprise. Sachi has sent you a gift box. Sachi. Naruto jumped off the mattress and walked up behind Kirito's chair as his friend reached up and pressed the icon to open the gift, which turned out to be a black crystal that hovered over the desk. Kirito raised a hand under the crystal and brought it closer to him before pressing a button at the top to activate it. The two watched as the crystal began to glow and hovered higher than before. Merry Christmas Kirito. Kirito let out a gasp while Naruto studied the crystal with a raised eyebrow. A message crystal. By the time you hear this, it'll be dead, probably be dead now. How do I explain this to tell the truth? I never want to leave the town of beginnings, Sachi confessed through her crystal. She seemed to be expressing her final thoughts as she left Kirito her final words. But I felt that if I kept fighting with an attitude like that it'd probably die someday, and it's no one's fault. It's my own problem Kirito. Ever since that night when you found me, you kept on telling and promising me I won't die each night. But I knew that if I'm killed anyway, you would be blaming yourself, so I decided to record this for you. Sachi's voice let out a small giggle before she continued, and by the way, I know how strong you really are, though it was completely by accident when I saw it back then. No matter how much I thought about it, I could never really figured out why you hid your level and fought with us, but when I learned how strong you really were, I couldn't help but feel relieved. So if I die, you have to do your best to keep on living, okay? See the end of this world, and why it was created, and the reason a weak girl like me ended up here, and the reason we met, that's what I wish for. Actually there is one other thing, that friend of yours, Naruto. I know the two of you might be at odds right now, but I want you to try and make up with him. I wish I could had the chance to meet the person you talked about so highly. Naruto blinked a few times at that before glancing down at Kirito, who seemed to be completely focused on the message. There's still plenty of time left, so seeing as it's Christmas I'll sing you song. The two listened in silence as Sachi started to hum a Christmas turn through the message crystal, Naruto placing a comforting hand on Kirito's shoulder as the teenager's body trembled and tears were going down his cheeks. Kirito, I'm so glad I met you, thank you for everything, goodbye. But the crystal reaching the end of the message, the glowing within it started to fade, and once it had disappeared completely the crystal stopped hovering before falling onto the desk in front of crying Kirito. Despite what she thought, that girl was strong in her own way, Naruto commented while turning away from Kirito. So, are you content with her last words? Kirito's fists tightened as he lifted his head to look at the crystal. I fully expected her final words to be her cursing me out or something like that. She's not the only one that feels like that. There must be a lot of players who are going through what she is. Then it will be our job to help them out if they need it. Back then I was thinking about the two of us forming a guild of our own. But now maybe it'd be better to keep us as a two-person party. Naruto leaned back against Kirito's chair with him partially sitting behind his friend's head, waiting for him to stop crying before speaking again. What do you think? Yeah, I'm all for it, Kirito replied with a nod before wiping away his remaining tears. Naruto, let's become stronger so we don't have to lose anyone else that we care about. Naruto nodded his head before speaking up, of course. Merry Christmas, Kirito. Merry Christmas. A grin grew on Naruto's face before he turned to look at Kirito. So you talked highly about me, huh? I'm flattered. Damn it, Naruto. Kirito shouted back while turning to look at him. The two stared at each other for a few seconds before they started to chuckle, which turned into full-blown laughter as it continued on. The past few months he had gone through had been rough, and he knew it would always be reminded of that pain and guilt. But at that Kirito was happy to have his best friend there to help him through it. Stupid Kirito, I wanted to see Silica's dragon, Naruto grumbled to himself as he walked out of the Black Iron Palace, where he had met up with the former leader of the Silver Flags Guild. The guild had been wiped out by Titan's Hand, which was a guild of orange players that went around killing other players. A few days ago, after his guild had been wiped out by the Pkers, the leader had gone to the front lines and begged every player he had crossed to avenge his dead friends. Eventually he came across the division that Kirito and Naruto were a part of, and the two agreed to take the request. After a week of scouting the situation, Kirito and Naruto had discovered that a female player by the name of Rosalia was the leader of Titan's Hand and kept herself as a green player in order to lure unsuspecting players into an ambush. The two beaters soon come up with a plan to capture her and her guild once she focused on a new target and would use that player as bait in order to trap the Orange Guild. Naruto and Kirito didn't need to wait long as they soon came across a nice cheerful girl named Silica. The girl had gotten lost in the Forest of Wandering after separating herself from a party that Rosalia had joined and as a result had lost her partner, a feathered little dragon named Pina, in battle against a group of drunken apes. Kirito and Naruto sprang into action and saved the girl from the monsters before assisting her on finding a rare item known as the Numa flower, which could revive Pina within the 3-day limit. After giving the girl some new equipment and discussing what they were planning on doing, the party of 3 went to the floor 47 and managed to track down the flower, and just like they had planned, Rosalia and her guild had tried to ambush them only to surrender after finding out that Naruto and Kirito were indeed the famous twin swordsmen that went around assisting weaker players and clearing many boss fights, even though it was only the two of them. Once the battle was over, however, Naruto and Kirito had went back and forth on who would go to the prison to confirm with the Silver Flags member on the mission success, and it didn't go in Naruto's favor. I hope he realizes that I'm gonna get back at him for this. Naruto crossed his arms with a huff, walking towards the teleportation gate to meet up with Kirito, who was most likely saying goodbye to Silica. But as he was turning the corner, the blonde teen bumped into a taller male figure and was forced to take a step back. Oh, sorry about that. It's alright, I should kept an eye on my own surroundings. Naruto's body tensed up as he heard the voice spoke up, snapping his head up with wide eyes to look up at the person who spoke. For a split second he thought he had heard his brother's voice, but when he looked up at the man he saw that his appearance was completely different from Akihiko's, where his brother was thin with metallic eyes and short dark hair. This man was muscular and tall with long lighter hair that was put into a ponytail. He was wearing a red coat over his crimson and white armor that was customary for those who were a part of the Knight of the Blood, though that made sense since the man before him was the one who founded the guild and was its leader, Commander Heathcliff. Are you alright? You look like you've seen a ghost, Heathcliff questioned, and Naruto noticed that his voice was different as well. Why yeah, I'm fine, Naruto replied as he averted his gaze from the taller man. What was that? You must be Naruto, one of the 2 swordsmen of Twilight. I don't believe we've ever met face to face, Heathcliff said before glancing behind the blonde towards the Black Iron Palace. So what brings you all the way down to here? This is far from the front lines. There were some orange players that my partner and I had arrested under the request of a player who managed to survive one of their attacks, Naruto explained, while finally looking up at the man. I was just confirming that the crystal we used teleported them here. Wait, what are you doing here? Should you be on the upper floors yourself? Unlike me, you're a pretty important person, right? Heathcliff let out a chuckle at that. Yes, I suppose I am. Our guild has certainly grown since I started it up. Maybe you and Kirito would like to join us. No thanks, the two of us are fine on our own. Naruto shook his head a few times. Joining a guild isn't really something we have any desire for at the moment. Very well, I won't pressure you two on it, but as for your earlier question, there are a few things that I needed to take care of on this floor, and I just finished them up, Heathcliff replied with a smile. Actually, I was about to get some dinner on floor 34. There's a little place there that is very good. Would you like to join me? Huh? Naruto tilted his head in confusion. To be honest, while I don't really complain on the meals that we get at the guild, Heathcliff started as he smiled down at the blonde, but every now and then I like to go out and enjoy myself without my guards following me everywhere I go, so what do you say? My treat. Huh, I guess I can understand that, sort of, Naruto replied before shaking his head, but I should get back to Kirito. I need to get some payback for dumping this on me, thank you for the offer though. After a few seconds of silence, Heathcliff nodded his head and turned his body around, closing his eyes as he started to walk away. I understand it's a shame, the ramen they make is very delicious. Did you say ramen? Naruto suddenly questioned as he looked up at the taller man, who was stunned at how fast the teen had moved from several feet. Heathcliff shook his head a few times before he smiled down at the blonde. That's right, it was finding surprising to find suck. Take me there. Huh? I said take me there. Naruto shouted as he grabbed the front of the taller man's coat with crazy wide eyes. It's been so damn long since I've had ramen, and you don't get in between a man and something that he really wants. Alright, calm down now. I mean. Floor 34 Ichiraku restaurant. Wow, just look at this pile. A female voice spoke up next as a cute long-haired brunette wearing a white cooking uniform and blue apron looked over to the pile of empty bowls stacking up next to their blonde customer. Hess already ate 20 large bowls. Shuji GGHHO Naruto replied blissfully as he devoured up the noodles at a furious pace. Laughter soon followed as an older-looking man with a similar outfit to the girl crossed his arms with a smile on his face. Haha. Such an appetite with this one, I'm glad you enjoy it so much. I didn't think my offer would backfire me, Heathcliff said to himself as he glanced at the significant drop of core in his inventory. Taking notice too that the man had said, Naruto slowly came to a halt and turned to look at Heathcliff with an awkward smile. Sorry about that, it's been a really long time since I've had ramen this good. Yes, that's why I like to come here, Heathcliff replied with a smile as he looked down at his half-eaten bowl. After having one bowl of Tuchi's ramen, I decided to make this my getaway from all the responsibilities for a bit. I guess I can see what you're talking about. Wait, did you say this cook's name is Tuchi? Naruto questioned as he snapped his head to look at the man, who tilted his head at the sudden question. It was just the two of them at the booth since Tuchi and the girl had gone into the back to work on making more ramen. That's right, the NPCs that work here are a father named Tuchi Ichiraku and his daughter Am. Is there a problem? Not really. After a few seconds of silence, Naruto looked back down at his bowl and stared down at the lone fish cake that was floating in the broth. It couldn't be just a coincidence, could it? No Kayaba really. Heathcliff's voice snapped the blonde teen out of his thoughts with his next question. Naruto, you're crying. Naruto's eyes widened as he took notice to the tear falling down his cheeks before bringing a sleeve up to his face to wipe them away. Are you alright? I'm fine. Naruto grinned widely as he once again started to eat his ramen, not paying attention to Heathcliff's side glance. Before the man returned to his own meal, the two continued to eat in silence until Am returned to give Naruto a new bowl. But as he was about to start, he saw that Heathcliff was now looking at a pop-up screen that appeared in front of him. Did something come up? Yes, I suppose you could say that, Heathcliff replied as he dismissed the screen before standing up from his seat. I'm afraid I'll have to depart. It seems my men need me to return to headquarters for an urgent matter. It was interesting chatting with you, Naruto. I hope we can do it again. Naruto nodded his head as he and Heathcliff shook hands. Yeah, I look forward to it. Thanks again for telling me about this place. No, it was my pleasure, Heathcliff replied with a smile as he turned around and made his way out the door, glancing back at Naruto who had returned to eating his meal. Time seemed to pass by quickly as Naruto sat alone in his seat, looking down at his empty bowl. But the silence soon ended as a message icon flashed next to his head, causing him to tilt his head with an eyebrow raised. He lifted a hand up and pressed his index finger on the floating symbol. A message emerged from the icon to reveal that the sender was from Kirito, asking him where he was and if something happened. I think I better get back to Kirito now. We need to head back to the front lines tomorrow. Naruto stared at the message for a few moments before he slid off the stool and turned around to see that the game's outside settings had already switched to nighttime. Wow, time went by quickly. It's too bad you're leaving so soon, Am spoke up as she reached over the counter and picked up the bowl. My dad and I don't usually get that many customers now that the new floors are opening up. That's too bad. The ramen was delicious, Naruto said with a large grin as he turned to look at the waitress. I'll definitely come back and even bring some of my friends too. Am flashed him a warm smile while closing her eyes. The two of us will be looking forward to. The brunette was cut off as a large explosion occurred in the back, shocking the two greatly as they turned towards the kitchen entrance to see black smoke pouring out of the room. Dad. Hey. Are you alright? Naruto called out as he leaped over the counter to stand next to the female NPC, who had dropped the bowl in her hands, causing it to shatter as it connected with the floor. Don't worry, I'm alright. Tuchi's voice was heard through the smoke followed by several loud coughs. The man emerged from the smoke still coughing, and his soaked body was covered in soot created from the smoke. Great, looks like this was another failure. Failure? You've got to be more careful, Dad. Forget about that recipe already. Am said as she went to her father's side and helped him to one of the stools. But I'm so close, Am, Tucci replied with a sigh as he body slouched forward. If only I had the right ingredients, then my recipe and method would really bring in more business. After getting even more curious on the two were talking about, Naruto decided to speak up. Wait, just what are you talking about? What kind of recipe? It's a ramen recipe, one that I've been working on for a long time now. You see, it is every ramen chef's dream to create the ultimate ramen, and I actually managed to create my own recipe. Unfortunately, I don't have the ingredients I need, so I've been having a hard time finding the right substitutes, Tucci explained as his daughter walked off, returning a few seconds later with a glass of water in her hand before offering it to the older man. As you can see, however, the wrong combination backfires on me, so I don't think he'll be finishing it anytime soon. Watching as the man gulped down his drink, Naruto tilted his head in confusion. So why can't you get the ingredients? Are they expensive? Not at all, there are only 4 things I need, and I know exactly where they are, Tucci replied before placing the glass down on the counter. The problem is that the ingredients are in Floor 44's dungeon, and each has a guardian watching over them. I'm not in any condition to go after the ingredients myself. Oh well, I guess he'll just have to keep trying. Naruto watched as Am placed a hand on her father's shoulder, the player saying nothing as he watched the two until another pop-up appeared in front of him. Congratulations. You are Ichiraku's 100th visitor. As such, you've unlocked the ultimate ramen recipe quest and can gather ingredients for Tucci's recipe. You must have a party of 4 before entering the dungeon. The ultimate ramen. Alright then, Naruto grinned as he moved his hand to the screen and dismissed it before shifting his gaze towards the man. Don't worry about it, old man. He'll get those ingredients for you. What? Really? Tucci looked up at Naruto with a surprised expression. Of course, I promise he'll bring them back here, so be ready to make me a bowl when I come back. Naruto said as he spun on his feet and ran out towards the exit, slamming the wooden door wide open as he left. The two NPCs stared at the open door for a few seconds before Am turned to look at her father. Do you think I'll be alright? I'm not sure, but I like the determination in his eyes. Tucci crossed his arms, and a small frown grew on his face. It will be dangerous, however. Hopefully he won't do this. Alo. Excuse me. The two turned their heads to see that Naruto had returned and was once again standing at the entryway. I forgot to ask you before, but what were those ingredients you need again? The two only stared at Naruto as he rubbed the back of his head with a sheepish grin on his face. The next day, both Kirito and Naruto were sitting in the tavern they had taken silica to the day before, the former staring hard at his companion with his arms crossed. So let me see if I got this right, you crossed paths with Heathcliff after meeting up with the client at the prison. Yup. He then treated you to dinner at a ramen shop, which you didn't even think about telling me about. Some of the best ramen I've ever had, Naruto replied with a grin, not noticing one of his friend's hands clenching onto his sleeve. Kirito's eyebrow twitched several times at that. So you keep saying anyway. The two of you talked for a bit, but then he had to leave. Said something urgent came up. Then, as you were leaving, the chef's kitchen exploded, and after he came out, he told you about an ultimate recipe he was making. Kirito continued, simplifying the story as much as he could, while Naruto nodded his head in confirmation. And now you are taking a super rare quest in order to make the ultimate ramen, and we need 4 people in our party to complete it. Come on, Kirito, I've explained this to you 3 times now. Naruto tilted his head slightly as he studied his friend. Why do you keep repeating it? The black-haired swordsman stared at Naruto for a few seconds before his body slouched and a sigh escaped his lips. That luck of yours is really random. You somehow get the best situations to happen to you, and I know for a fact that it is too good for even the game. I know my brother has nothing to it. I've always been lucky when it came to games. Naruto could only shrug his shoulders at that. You didn't complain when I played in those casinos. I still have no clue how you managed to bankrupt 4 of them with a single core, Kirito commented before he noticed that Naruto was looking at his menu, scrolling through a few options with his finger. What are you doing? Looking for 2 more players to add to our party. The quest's mandatory number has to be 4. With a several button pressings, the blonde sent out 4 invites and waited for a few minutes before 2 message icons appeared. Quickly opening the first 2, Naruto read through them and dismissed them with a sigh. Well, Agil and Argo are out. Agil is getting things together to set up his new shop, and Argo is currently on another quest looking for a rare item. What about Klein? Kirito questioned with raised eyebrow, and also as soon as he asked that another icon appeared. Opening the message, Naruto was taken aback to see that every word was written in caps. Hess definitely in, and really excited to find out that there's ramen in the game too. Sounds like someone else I know. Whatever, Hess going to meet us at this floor's teleport gate? Naruto smiled as he dismissed the pop-up before standing up from his seat. Let's go meet up with him. But shouldn't we be thinking about our final party member? Did you want to ask Silica? Kirito thought back to the girl, who as she was leaving with her newly revived dragon, had them add each other to their friends lists, though she did just get Pina back, so I don't think we should bring her into a possibly dangerous battle anytime soon. I know that, and just so you know, I already have the perfect person in mind to join us. You do? Yup, but we need to go there in person in order to get them. Go there in person? Who are you talking about? Kirito. Yeah, Klein. Looking away from the giant building in front of them, the Red did glance over to the teen who was leaning against the entrance wall with his arms crossed. It had been 10 minutes since Naruto had left them outside to meet up with whoever it was that was going to join their party. I know we were supposed to get a fourth member in our party and all, and Naruto was going inside to invite him, but I have to ask. Why are we on floor 55, standing in front of one of the top guilds in the game? Kirito finished as he glanced up at the red flags hovering over their heads. Yeah, I mean, I didn't think you guys knew anyone from the Knights of the Blood Oath, you know, with you two being solo players and all. Not personally, but we are still a part of the front lines and have to work with them though. There is one person that we know well enough, that is a member. However, Kirito seemed to trail off as he looked away from the flags as the sounds of heavy footsteps could be heard. Here they come. Huh? That was quick. What the hell? Klein's jaw dropped as he looked towards the building to see Naruto was indeed running towards them, except he wasn't alone. Heaved over his shoulder was what appeared to be a chestnut-haired girl wearing a signature uniform of the guild, and behind the blonde were dozens of angry players from the same guild. H's not serious. One of the swordsmen of Twilight is trying to kidnap the sub-commander. Get back here. Return our sub-commander immediately. How dare you try to kidnap her? Yeah, I'll pay for this. I told you this was too reckless. The girl called out over Naruto's shoulder as he continued to run past the entrance, and the two male players, Kirito and Klein, looked back at the charging Red Knights and back at each other before chasing after Naruto as fast as they could. The three men ran for a long time to escape their pursuers, turning into several alleyways and ducking under stalls before they finally managed to lose them. The group managed to make it to the teleportation gate, and Naruto finally let the girl down to stand on her own, but once her feet touched the floor, the girl smacked Naruto across the head. Ow. What the hell, Asuna? Naruto whined as he rubbed the sore spot where Asuna had hit him. Because that was a stupid idea. What were you thinking? You were the one who said you wanted to come, but you didn't think you could leave. That doesn't mean you have to lift me on your shoulders to get me to go. Kirito and Klein watched the two go back and forth in silence, glancing at each other briefly before looking back at the two. Why are you treating me like the bad guy? You wanted out so I helped you. I'm the sub-commander of the guild, which means I can't just take off. Asuna frowned as she placed a hand on her hip. If you had let me finish, you would have heard me say that I was going to let the commander and the others know before I left. Oh well, too late now, Naruto replied with a shrug, making Asuna let out a sigh. You are so hopeless. The chestnut-haired girl looked over to see a familiar face standing a few feet away from them with a lightly scruffy man wearing a red headband, who seemed to be in a daze. Hey there, Kirito, it's been a while. Yeah, it has. Kirito scratched the side of his head as he recalled what the men chasing them had been saying earlier. So you're the Knight of the Blood Oath sub-commander now, huh? Only just recently. I don't know the exact details, but is that guy alright? Asuna asked as she pointed at the silent Klein, who continued to stare at her with an open jaw. That's fine, you probably know him from the raids, but this guy's name is Klein, Hess, the leader of the Furinkazen guild, Kirito explained as he motioned to the still Reed before turning to Klein. This is Asuna, and you already know what guild she's a part of. The three of us worked together to defeat the first floor boss, and Naruto's has been staying in contact with her since then. Klein. Wow, Hess not moving at all. Klein, you okay? Naruto called out as he walked closer to the man, before waving his hand in front of his face. That's so weird, is he lagging or some gaahh? Naruto was caught by surprise when Klein suddenly wrapped an arm around his neck and put the blonde in a chokehold. Damn you, Naruto. Why are you so damn lucky? Klein shouted as he tightened his hold on the teen's neck. Lucky? What are you talking about? Naruto responded as he struggled to escape. Why do you keep doing this? Asuna watched as Naruto succeed in getting out of the chokehold before he punched Klein in the face and moved behind the man. She felt a sweat drop fall down the side of her face as Naruto grabbed Klein's arms and pressed his foot into the older man's back. Is this a normal thing between them? Kirito nodded his head as he watched with a bored look. Only recently, but yes, so you agreed to Naruto's request to join our party. Sorta, he kidnapped me before I could officially say yes. Kirito let out a sigh at her answer, but looking for legendary ingredients for a recipe does sounds interesting, and I've never had ramen before, so I was curious on what it tastes like. Yeah, I've never had ramen before. After hearing that, it's no wonder why Naruto would force you to come. The guy loves his ramen, Kirito said with a shrug, before noticing that a shouting Naruto was standing on top of Klein's back with the blonde's arms pumped up in the air. Since we're all here, Naruto, what are these ingredients that we need to get? Well, according to the old man, there are 4 areas in the 44th floor dungeon that we need to go to one at a time to get each ingredient. Each one will have a special monster boss that will hold the title Ramen Guardian, and each one has a specific task that we will need to complete in order to receive the ingredient, Naruto explained to the 3. Even Klein, who was no sitting up straight now that Naruto was no longer standing on his back. The ingredients we need are the odd-shaped vegetables, the blessed elixir which will turn itself into the broth when we bring it to the restaurant, golden eggs, and finally tough tender beef. Tough tender beef. Odd-shaped vegetables. Those are some weird names, Kirito commented as he crossed his arms. So what are these tasks we have to do? I don't know, but from what I've heard, one person can take on one task at a time if we want. Naruto shook his head as he spoke, before moving his hands behind his head. The first ingredient we need to go after is the golden eggs, and that one is being guarded by a boss called the Mother Goose in the area called the Feathery Fields. The goose? No problem, I can take care of that one, Klein said with a smirk as he placed his hands on his hips. Asuna, Naruto and Kirito looked at each other for a few seconds before focusing their gaze on the oldest player of the group, the black-haired swordsman being the first one to speak as a small frown formed on his face. Are you sure, Klein? We can decide who goes after we get there. No way, Kirito. It'll be fine. A big grin grew on Klein's face as he gave the 3 a thumbs up. I mean, come on. What's so bad about? Floor 44 dungeon area. A huge fucking goose, Klein shouted as he and the others stared up at the giant bird looking back at them from her nest. The group had managed to find the feathery fields easily once they entered the dungeon and came across the Mother Goose boss, which looked like a giant white and red goose with glowing red eyes. Klein stared up at the Mother Goose for a few seconds before turning his head to look back at his party. So who wants to? Yeah, I've got this, Klein. We'll be waiting for you right here. Do your best. Klein gave the 3 a blank look when he saw that they were standing several yards away from him. Naruto was standing in the center with a thumbs up pointed at him, while Kirito was waving at him, and Asuna had her hands cupped around her mouth to project her voice. You guys suck, but I guess that's what I deserve for opening my mouth like that. Iridid turned around to see the Mother Goose stood up from her nest and stretched her wings out with a loud squawk, but to his surprise, no health bar appeared next to its head, instead a golden egg logo with a number 2 inside it and a small picture of the Mother Goose. What the hell? The pop-up message appeared in front of Klein. Mother Goose is protecting her eggs. Defeat her before you go after them, and once you've retrieved the eggs, head back to your party to complete the task. If you stun her correctly, then you can retrieve the eggs, but watch out because she has a real bite. So it's like those old video games I used to play as a kid. Sounds easy enough, Klein muttered to himself as he unsheathed his sword, securing it in both hands before charging forward. Bring it on, you overgrown excuse for poultry. The Mother Goose's eyes gleamed as it let out another squawk and swing its head across, only for Klein duck his head to dodge the attack. The Redeed leaped forward and struck the giant goose's legs, making the Mother Goose let out a cry as it retracted one of its webbed feet. The bird quickly flapped its wings and created a powerful gust that sent Klein high into the air before he crashed onto his back. Okay, that hurt. Do you think I'll be alright? Asuna asked as she watched Klein get back on his feet before charging at the Mother Goose once again. Hell will be fine, Asuna. Klein is a tough bastard. Naruto flashed her a grin as he placed a hand on her shoulder, and besides, if anything happens to go wrong, then we'll go in there to help him, right, Kirito? Yeah, Kirito watched as Klein stuck the remaining leg of the Mother Goose, causing it to crash into the ground and its head to slam into the ground with a loud thud, and not a second later the Redeed made a dash for the nest. But as Klein ran towards the nest to get the first egg, the Mother Goose's neck twisted and slammed into the man's back. Klein was sent tumbling forward and landed on his face before twisting his body around to look at the giant goose, who was looking back at him with a tilted head and glowing red eyes. Glancing up at the icon of the Mother Goose, he saw that half of it was remaining. Damn it, what's this thing's weakness? The neck, Klein. The Redeed looked past the goose to see that it was Kirito who had shouted towards him. Her neck is one giant blind spot. If you get her at the right time, you can get a good chunk of damage in. Her neck, huh? Klein looked back at the Mother Goose to see that it was rearing its head back again. Oh, what the hell, ain't like I got anything to lose. The large goose shot its head forward at the now standing Klein, who moved out of the way and raised his sword over his right shoulder. His katana began to glow a bright yellow-orange, which signaled that his skill was ready, and Klein almost instantly appeared above the goose's neck, slashing downward. Seconds later, the Mother Goose let out a screech before its body went limp like a wet noodle, and the samurai armored player once again made a dash for the nest. Holy crap, these things are huge. Inside the nest were a dozen large eggs that were 5 times the size of a normal goose egg, which meant that if Klein wanted to complete this quickly, then he was going to need both hands. After sheathing his sword, Klein reached down and picked up 2 of the eggs, which he needed to wrap his arms around to get a good grip, and started to make his way back towards his group. Unfortunately though, the stunned Mother Goose was starting to get her bearings as she raised her head and began to shake it about, before noticing that Klein was running towards his group. The Mother Goose let out another squawk and rose to her feet, causing Klein to jump at the sudden action. reaction before he glances back to see that the giant goose was back on her feet and charging at him once again. Shit. Klein exclaimed before he started running again with the mother goose at his heels, trying to bite him several times, only for him to leap out of reach just in time. This ramen better be worth it. Time seemed to slow down as Klein reached a few yards away from his party, and the mother goose was attempting one last bite, this time her mouth even closer than before and seconds from clamping down on her victim. But just as she was about to close her mouth, a green light flashed in her eyes, and she felt multiple hits strike her face, before sending her crashing on her back. Naruto and Kirito had their hands on the hilts of their swords, as they stared with wide eyes as Asuna lowered her rapier, her hair flowing lightly in the air from her quick movements. Klein's mouth was open as he stared at the giant boss laying behind the girl, as she spun around and started walking towards the group. That was awesome, Naruto muttered while Kirito nodded his head in agreement. Well, that's one down, so what's next? Asuna said with a bright smile. Floor 44 Dungeon Mirage Falls. After securing the eggs in Klein's inventory, the group made their way to the next area and were greeted by a beautiful waterfall that reached higher than the trees surrounding them, the water closer to the giant pond that was located at the foot of the waterfall, with several small pedestals of land, and could only stare in awe at the water, which was so clear that you could see the very bottom and the aquatic creatures that inhabited it. As the men of the party continued to look around the area and the pond for any signs of the next ingredient, Asuna noticed that there was something sticking out of the waterfall. Hey, I think I found it. Asuna called out to the others as she quickly, yet cautiously, made her way to the edge of the pond that was closest to the waterfall. Careful Asuna, we don't know where the next guardian will show up, Naruto warned as he and the two watched as she leaped onto one of the pedestals before she drew her weapon. Asuna nodded her head as she jumped to the next pedestal directly in front of the waterfall and shifted her stance with her rapier poised in front of her. I already had that in mind, thanks. Is it me, or does she have mixed feelings about this quest? Klein asked as glanced towards Naruto and Kirito. You're right about that, but the two of don't really go on jobs that much, so it's hard to tell. Kirito answered before motioning to Naruto. It's mostly this guy who gets us to work together. When you two were at each other's throats, Naruto rolled his eyes as he thought about the few times that Kirito and Asuna would argue about plans that the other would make about how to take on certain quests. But the reason Asuna is like this is because Shess never had ramen before. Klein blinked several times before snapping his head to look at Naruto. Are you serious? It's one of the most common foods to get. Well, not to her, Naruto replied with a shrug of his shoulders before looking back at Asuna, who was slowly reaching out towards the waterfall. When I asked her about it after she told me, she just said that her mother won't let her even try it, so of course I would invite her to try one of the greatest foods in the world. Wow, I don't know what to say to that. That's Naruto for you, Kirito said with a sigh as he already knew about his friend's obsession to ramen. The sound of Asuna letting out a cute cry was followed by the sound of something or someone falling into the water and creating a giant splash. Naruto, Kirito and Klein scanned the pond for any signs of Asuna after she disappeared into the pond, but soon released the breaths they had been holding when her chestnut hair emerged from the water and the girl took a gasp of breath. What the heck was that? Something grabbed onto my ankle and pulled me in. A small whirlpool quickly formed in front of the girl, and a multiple blue figure emerged from the water and was now standing on top of it. The figure turned out to be a light blue-skinned woman with dark blue hair, with a fin sticking out of the top and fish-like ears. Tribal marking covered her body, and she wore a revealing semi-armored dress that seemed to be made up of several different colors of water. The woman opened her eyes to reveal that they were red, and to Asuna seemed to reflect her image perfectly in those eyes. You seek to obtain my sacred elixir? I know that's a monster and all, but she's so freaking hot. Klein said as he looked at the beautiful female boss. On either side of him, Naruto smacked his palm into his forehead, while Kirito shook his head with a sigh. Asuna was silent for a few seconds before she moved over to the pedestal she had been previously standing on and got back on her feet, ignoring the wetness she was feeling as she studied the female boss. It was the first time she ever seen or heard a humanoid-looking boss, which had a pop-up with the name Undine the water nymph over to her head, speak so clearly before. That's right. Very well, if you can finish my task successfully, then my elixir is yours. The water in the pond picked up around Asuna and Undine. Several pillars of water and water shot into the air around the two and stopped at various heights. At the very tip of the water pillars, the surfaces became solid as they turned to ice. Within the waterfall, the box containing the ingredient rose up, past the water pressure descending on top of it, and reached the top at the very edge of the watery cliff. Kneeling down towards the water, Undine placed her open palm on the surface of the water before she clenched her hand around something in the water, pulling it out to reveal a long turquoise spear with a blue-bladed tip, and at the same time a pop-up appeared in front of Asuna with a yes and no selection. It is very simple, the first one to reach the box and grab it wins. You can use whatever method you like and we can interfere with each other using our weapons or the surrounding area. However, your companion are forbidden from helping you. If they even step foot near the pond while the competition is going on, then it will be an automatic victory for me. Do you agree to the terms? Yes I do, pressing the green button on the screen, Asuna raised her rapier and pointed its blade at the water nymph. A smirk appeared on Undine's face before she spun her spear a few times and positioned it at her side. Alright then Undine reached up with her free hand and removed one of the decorative shells on the collar of her dress before holding it out for Asuna to see. Once this shell makes contact with the pond, we shall begin. With a strong throw, Undine tossed the shell into the air, leaving the two to wait for it to hit the water. Meanwhile Klein had side-glanced at Naruto and Kirito while crossing his arms. What's up with this water? I thought this game didn't have any magic in it. I don't think it's magic, not really, Kirito answered as he brought his hand up to his chin to go into his thinking pose as he studied the water pillars. It might be that it is the settings for the task at hand, and the same for the dome of water. So that means that Asuna won't have to worry about Undine attacking her using the water. Go on Asuna. You can do it. Naruto cheered with a smile as he turned away from his male companions to watch the final member of his party. Watch out for any sneak attacks. This boss is water-based so she has an advantage. Kirito called out to the girl, who nodded her head at her teammates' words without taking her eyes off the shell as it continued its descent. Why does it feel like their cheers are more meaningful this time? Klein muttered to himself. Seconds later, the shell finally finished its descent and dropped into the water with a loud splash. With a slight bend of her knees, Asuna leaped onto the closest earth pillar and managed to place both feet on the surface before running upward as fast as she could, darting her eyes to the side as the sounds of something coming at her. Asuna put more force onto her next step before once again leaping towards another pillar, which was lucky for her as Undine appeared where she was standing originally with her spear piercing into the rock. Regaining her balance, Asuna landed on one of the smaller water pillars platforms. What are you? Now, I did say that we can interfere with each other's progresses. With that said, Undine leaped toward Asuna again and swung her spear at the girl, who easily managed to block the attack. However, the small size of the platform caused a female player to lose her balance and slip off, causing Asuna to let out a shout as her body was forced to take a kneeling position to regain it. Not so easy fighting inside such a small space, is it? Narrowing her eyes slightly, Asuna quickly slid a rapier away along Undine's spear until it was away from the blade, and with the sudden disappearance of her resistance, the boss started to fall forward, but Asuna wasn't finished however, as she shifted her kneeling stance and attacked Undine's legs, causing the blue humanoid to lose her footing even more. And with a free hand the chestnut-haired girl grabbed a good chunk of Undine's dress and flipped her over her shoulder, not even taking a second to watch Undine wall behind her. Asuna once again started her ascent towards the cliff. She managed to get a good distance closer to the top of the waterfall before she heard Naruto call out to her. Asuna. Behind you. Turning her body around to see what was happening, Asuna could see that Undine was still a good from her, but had the spear in a throwing position before releasing it with a powerful throw. Oh crap. Asuna barely managed to dodge the incoming spear before landing on a pillar and stabbed the rapier's blade into the rock to get a good grip. The spear made contact with the pillar behind Asuna and caused several cracks to form from the impact, with a health bar appearing next to it, with half of it already empty. That was close. Hold on, the pillars can be damaged. Kirito noted as he watched Asuna swing herself to the closest pillar by using her sword as a temporary monkey bar. That means that none of them are immortal objects. If that's so, then there is a limit on what these things can take, Naruto pointed out, which caught Asuna's attention as she heard what both of the beaters had said. Durability, huh? Asuna muttered to herself as she glanced at her rapier and then at Undine, who was a few pillars from reaching her, before she focused on the damaged pillar where the spear was still located. It's a long shot, but it just might work, though she's probably going to kill me after this for breaking her sword, raising her sword until it was resting horizontally rear her face. The blade starting to glow a bright dark green before she leaped off the small platform towards the damaged pillar, circling around it to the other side. What is she doing? Undine is getting closer. Klein questioned as he and the others watched as Asuna start to attack the pillar, causing more of its durability to decrease. I don't know what you're planning, but it's over now. Undine called out as she actually passed by Asuna and was going for the prize at the top. Hey Aya. Asuna let out a loud shout as she unleashed on last blow to the pillar, finishing off the remainder of its durability. At first nothing to happen, but as finished Asuna removing her blade and leaped out of the way, the pillar began to tilt before it finally fell in the direction that Undine was currently located. That's not, Undine shouted just before the pillar slammed into her and caused the two to fall into the pond below. Asuna watched as the pillar created a giant splash of water before it exploded into data fragment, before gazing at the sword in her hand in time to see it explode as well. Oh well, I expected the sword to reach its limit with that attack. Hopefully after this, Liz will be able to make me a new one, but first things first. Tilting her head up to look at the waterfall's top, the girl continued her way up the pillars until she reached the very top and jumped towards the ingredients container, grabbing onto the container with a smile. Asuna turned her head to face her party members while holding the blessed elixir up high for them to see. I got it. That's awesome, Asuna. Naruto called out to the girl as the pillars and water domes started to disappear. Very impressive, Klein said with a smirk as he and Kirito watched a girl jump down the rocky ledges that trailed down to the ground floor. I can see why she was made the sub-commander of the Knights of the Blood Oath. Okay guys, wets. Why are you guys all wet? Asuna asked when she noticed that the three were soaked with large amounts of water dripping off their outfits. Kirito was the one to answer as he crossed his arms. The dome may have been there to keep us from getting in, but it didn't stop the tidal wave from coming out and hitting us. Sorry about that, Asuna replied with an awkward laugh. Well whatever, we're halfway done. Naruto grinned as he gave his friends a peace sign. Only 2 more ingredients to go, and we get to have the ultimate ramen. So what's last ingredient on the list again? Klein asked as he and the others were currently resting in a safe zone, sitting in a circle facing each other. It did not take long for the group to find the twisted garden and the next guardian, which turned out to be regular-sized rabbit that was humanoid and was wearing suspenders and a farmer's cap called the Green Thumb Rabbit. After seeing the creature, Kirito and Naruto had played rock, paper, scissors several times to see who would do the challenge. Klein glanced to his left to look at Kirito, who had one eyebrow twitching as he wiped off the dirt and other materials that covered him. It turns out that pulling out the rabbit's vegetables that could be monsters in disguise was a lot more annoying than it looked, especially when said rabbit was attacking you with bloody fangs and was jumping all over the place. It's called tough tender beef, Naruto replied as he looked down at the list before dismissing it. Since it's the last ingredient, it's probably going to be tough, but at least I won't have to worry about getting stomped on a colorful rabbit. Oh shut up. That was a vicious fluffy rodent from hell. Kirito shouted as he pointed accusingly at Naruto. Didn't you see the human bones spread all around the garden? Sorry Kirito, the only thing I saw was you running away from the rabbit after it bit through one of the vegetable monster's neck. Oh, and like you wouldn't have done the same? No, I certainly would run. Did you see the size of those fangs, man? It was like seeing a close-up version of Monty Python except you didn't pee yourself, the blonde replied with a smirk, making Kirito glare at both Naruto and the laughing Klein and Asuna. The former was laughing because he had seen the movie, while the other was laughing into the back of her hand from the back and forth between the two. The girl had taken out a spare rapier that she had in her inventory to replace the one she had lost, and though it was not as strong it would last her until she got a new one. I hope you go through hell with the next guardian. The Arai Naruto was cut off when he heard the sound of his stomach growling, placing a hand on his stomach. Hungry. Well, it is way past lunchtime now, so it makes sense, Klein noted as he glanced at the time before opening up his menu and selected an item from his inventory that made several hot dogs appear on a plate in his lap. Lucky for me, I stopped by a shop before meeting up with you guys. Aw man, why didn't I think of that? Naruto complained as he scratched both of his hands through his hair while letting out a groan. Luckily I managed to grab something that last night when you didn't come back. Awesome, that's just what I expect from you Kirito. Naruto smiled at Kirito who had opened his menu. But here's a problem for you Naruto. Kirito started to let out a laugh after he said this, which to the others sounded a little dark as they watched a white box appear in the black swordsman's hands. You see, I only have enough for one person. What? Oh come on Kirito. Are you really gonna rub that meal in my face? Without any regret. You're bluffing. Oh you think so? Kirito opened up the box to reveal a large cinnamon bun inside. Naruto watched in horror as the other member of the Swordsmen of Twilight slowly raised the pastry to his mouth and bitten down on it before he started to chew it. Delicious. You monster. How could you? Naruto cried out as he waved his arms frantically in the air, but Kirito seemed to ignore him as he continued to eat the cinnamon bun with a smug grin. I thought we were friends. Too bad, you snooze you lose. Naruto's body went limp and his head fell forward until it appeared to be hanging off his shoulders. This sucks. If you want, you could have some of mine. Asuna's voice spoke up making the two turn to see that Asuna was holding up a pink decorated box that held 2 mouthwatering sandwiches. I've been raising my cooking skill, so I've been dabbling with different recipes. Thanks Asuna, you're the best. Naruto smiled brightly at the girl before he picked up one of the sandwiches and held it up to his mouth. Kirito and Klein watched as Naruto started to take a bite of the sandwich, with Klein trembling violently from viewing the moment between the two. Thank you for the food. Asuna watched as Naruto enthusiastically sunk his teeth into the food, only to freeze up not even a second later. Huh? Is something wrong? The sandwich it's Itsuuji Naruto shouted before he attacked the sandwich. This is one of the best sandwiches I've ever had. Really? I'm glad to hear that, Asuna said before she started to eat her own sandwich. Wow, I really outdid myself this time. Hell yeah. Yeah, I've got to make these again the next time we hang out, Naruto said as he took the final bites of his sandwich. Sure, I can do that, Asuna replied with a smile and turned her head to look at Kirito. I'll make one for you too, one for each of us. Kirito raised an eyebrow at how satisfied Naruto looked after finishing the food. Sounds like a plan. Why are these two so damn lucky? Klein thought to himself as he stared enviously at the two swordsmen of Twilight. Floor 44 Dungeon Forest of Death. Just how long are they going to stare at that thing? Asuna muttered to herself with her arms crossed and was tapping her foot, starting to lose her patience. After managing to find the room leading to where the final guardian was, the men in the party stopped to look at the giant fists posed at either side of the entrance, which was shaped like a head, at least that's what they thought it was. And those are weird looking rocks. I think they're supposed to be statues. But the head it all deformed with those pointy things coming out from the top of it, and the job done to the arms are terrible. Maybe Kayaba was tired when he was working on this part. Klein offered with a shrug. I mean, he did create this entire world, so he had to have some off points in it. There's no way he would be this sloppy, Naruto argued as he crossed his arms, knowing full well that his brother was a near perfectionist when it came to his work. It's Elmo. Kirito was interrupted as Asuna marched past the group with a hand against her forehead. Enough. Who cares how it looks? Let's go already. Well, you heard the lady, let's go, Naruto said before he and the others followed after Asuna as she opened the door to the room. The group entered to see that a lone figure was standing in the middle of the room with its arms crossed. It looked like a humanoid cow wearing brown shorts and a large axe hammer on its back, and next to its head was the title Boros the Minotaur. It's about time you showed up. You guys were so slow, I was wondering when if you guys were ever gonna show up. The Minotaur called out to the players before shaking its head with a grunt. I was expecting more when I realized a group was going after the other guardians, but in the end it was a bunch of weaklings. Why are you all so silent? Has my very presence struck fear into your bodies? Boros questioned before letting out a bellowing laugh. I guess it's to be expected though, someone as strong and imposing as I can make the most powerful of men. Now those stupid horns make sense. Naruto called out as he tapped his fist into his palm. It was talking about this guy. Huh? No wonder it looks so weird, Kirito said as he looked at Naruto, but why would the final boss for the event be this thing? Klein scratched the back of his head at that. I don't know, a minotaur is probably the most normal thing to expect in a game like this. They're known for their brute strength, though their intelligence is another thing. What? How dare you? Come on guys, focus. There's no telling what task this thing has planned, even if it is a stupid, ugly, big-headed beast, Asuna commented once again interrupting the Minotaur, who was now glaring at them with steam blowing out of his nostrils. I will not stand by and let you insult me. Boros shouted as he pulled off his axe hammer and slammed its blade into the ground. The task you will need to complete is a one-on-one duel with me. Now choose which one of you I will defeat. A smirk grew on Naruto as he took a step forward, reaching up to place a hand on the hilt of his sword. That would be me. Excellent, my first victim. What is your name, boy? The Minotaur asked as he stared at the blonde member of the party. My name is Naruto. Seconds stared to pass before Boros let out a snicker, and it soon turned into a chuckle. What's so funny? That's a tasty name you've got there, fish cake. Naruto seemed to freeze up at that, which caused Asuna and Klein to look at him with puzzled looks, while Kirito took a step back with a fearful expression. What did you call me? Oh crap, don't say it again, Kirito thought to himself as he darted his gaze between Naruto and the Minotaur. You heard what I said, it's adorable to think you were named after a fish cake, Boros said with a small grin. Asuna and Klein watched as Naruto's body began to tremble, but as Klein was about to place a hand on Naruto's shoulder, Kirito quickly pulled him back before his fingers could make contact. What the hell, Kirito? Trust me, Klein, I did you a favor, Kirito said ominously as he heard Naruto start to let out a chuckle of his own. The stupid bull just had to push it. Pushed what? Klein questioned as he noticed a scared look on the black-haired teen's face. Naruto's berserk button, because there is one word you never say around or call Naruto fish cake. Kirito couldn't help but shiver the last time someone called Naruto a fish cake. It had been an orange player, and needless to say the results were not pretty once Naruto had been finished with him. Naruto? Are you okay? Asuna asked with a concerned look. The blonde player simply turned his head to look at his female friend, an incredibly large smile on his face as he spoke. Oh, don't worry about me, Asuna, just enjoy the show. Naruto patted her shoulder several times before turning his body around and started walking towards the Minotaur. But you guys be careful, the first few rows are splash zones. Splash zones. Asuna repeated with a stutter as she heard Naruto let out a laugh as he walked closer to the boss. Looks like it's just you and me, big guy, Naruto said as he once again reached up and grabbed onto Zangetsu's hilt once more. This time the wrappings around the blade came undone as Naruto swung the blade outward. I hope you are ready to give me that beef. Haha, that's laughable. When it comes to all of my battles, Boros raised his axe hammer high above his head before swinging it downwards towards Naruto's head. There has been none that have gotten close to defeating me. Time seemed to slow down as Naruto tilted his head up to give the Minotaur an unreadable expression before raising Zangetsu and had it intercept Boros' attack, which greatly shocked the humanoid beast. And no way, how were you able to block my attack? Maybe you're just not as strong as you think you are, Naruto replied as he held his sword in place with one hand. It will take a lot more to harm me and Zangetsu. Interesting, then I guess that means I don't have to hold back. Boros lifted his axe hammer into the air again, this time grabbing the handle with both hands before he started to spin it around, the blade glowing an orange-brown color. Take this. My Super Muost Ultimate Festival Firework Super Barrage. What a stupid name, and he said super twice. Kirito and the others couldn't help but sweat drop at the Minotaur's words. If Boros heard this, it didn't seem to bother him as he continued his attack and swung his weapon down at Naruto, who blocked the first strike while the ground started to crack under his feet. Don't think him done yet. There's still more to come. Boros pulled his still glowing weapon back and started spinning it again before attacking Naruto from a different direction, but once again Naruto blocked the strike. Damn you. This continued on for a while with each attack Boros delivering growing even stronger than the first, but Naruto continued to block each one. Using the spinning to increase the power of his attacks, Asuna noted as she watched dust and rubble pick up every time the two weapons clashed. Yeah, but Naruto doesn't even look phased, and his health hasn't even dropped that much before it heals itself, Klein pointed out with wide eyes. I knew he was strong, but this is incredible. That's just how Naruto chose to level up himself, and since Zangetsu levels up with him, both of their stats increase with every battle, Kirito explained as he crossed his arms, watching as Boros readied himself for the final attack. Looks like it's almost over. You've done well, but now it's over. With a powerful swing of his axe hammer, the Minotaur brought his blade towards Naruto's side in order to bisect him, but instead of blocking the attack this time, Naruto bent under Boros' attack and tilted his now glowing sword slightly. Sorry, but I'm not letting you attack me with that weapon anymore. Swinging Zangetsu up faster than the Minotaur could see, Naruto sliced, used his weapon break skill to slash through the large axe hammer and land a large blow on Boros at the same time. Naruto wasn't finished as he brought his sword back and slashed through the boss' stomach, causing a decent amount of the Minotaur's health to drop. Jumping back a few feet, the blonde let go of the handle to grab onto the ribbon before swing it around again, the blurring blade now a bright blue that seemed to surround Naruto. And one more thing, my name doesn't just translate to fish cake. Bending down a bit to build up strength into his legs, Naruto leaped at Boros, who raised his fist to strike the charging Naruto. I won't let you beat me. In a flash Naruto and Boros were back to back, both crouched forward from attacking. Kirito and the others watched as multiple slash marks appear on the Minotaur's chest and its health dropped to zero completely before letting out a roar as it exploded into fragments. My name also translates as Maelstrom. Remind me never to call Naruto a fish cake, Klein commented as they watched Naruto place his sword onto his back and the ribbon wrapped itself around Zangetsu once again. Agreed, Asuna and Kirito nodded their head at the same time. Hey guys. Naruto turned to the group with a large grin as he motioned to the pop-up with the words "You've won the tough tender beef." The blonde dismissed the message and made his way to his party. Now that we've got all the ingredients, let's complete the quest and get that ultimate ramen. Hell yeah. Klein cheered with a fist pump. I can't wait to try it, Asuna smiled as she placed her hands behind her back. I hope this dish was worth all this, Kirito said while placing a hand on his hip, still a little sour about the issue with the rabbit which he will never mention to any of their friends or worse, his sister. Ichiraku Ramen Restaurant. I can't believe you managed to get all the ingredients back too quickly. AM said as she served the four their drinks, while her father was in the back using the ingredients to prepare the ultimate ramen for the group. The four of us are just that awesome. Naruto replied. The four of them were sitting at the booth with Naruto and Kirito sitting next to each other, while Asuna was sitting the other side of Naruto, while Klein was seated next to Kirito. It was an interesting quest, and I'm curious on what this ultimate ramen tastes like, Asuna said while bringing a finger to her lips, her gaze drifting towards the ceiling. It's my first time having it, so I don't know what to expect. Well, I guess if you're really going to have it for the first time, what better one to start off with than one that is supposed to be the ultimate. Kirito was propping his head up with his hand, his chin resting on his open palm, looking to the Reteed sitting next to him. Kirito noticed he was staring at AM. Hey Klein, are you okay? It was after AM placed the final drink down and went into the kitchen to assist her father that Klein finally moved. He suddenly let out a sigh and let his head fall onto the counter. This really sucks. What do you mean? A pretty girl like that in Shessen NPC. Klein tilted his head a bit to look at Kirito and Naruto, showing that he had tears falling down his face. Why does life suck so much? That is really pathetic, Klein. Super pathetic. Leave me alone, the bandana-wearing man whined as his head returned to its original position. Going so long without a girlfriend is making me almost desperate, man. I'm not lucky like you too. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that before looking at Kirito, who was picking up his glass. Any idea what he's talking about? Not really, maybe if we ignore him he'll go back to normal, Kirito replied before taking a sip of his drink, while Naruto was nodding his head at the idea. Oh come on you two, it isn't so bad, Asuna chastised the two before flashing Klein a smile. I'm sure you'll find someone eventually, Klein. There's someone out there for everyone. You really think so? Thanks Asuna, Klein smiled back even though his face was still pressed against the counter. The group went quiet for a few minutes as they waited for Tucci and AM to finish making the ramen, speaking up from time to start some light conversations. Asuna moved her head around to get a good look at the interior of the restaurant. You know, this place isn't what I imagined it would look like. Were you picturing something like a stand with bar and stools? Kind of, that's what I've seen from the outside whenever I've walked by them, Asuna admitted as she turned to look at Kirito and Naruto. Are those places different? Not all the time, Naruto answered as he leaned back in his seat. Those places are the more common design, but there are some who make the place look like regular restaurants, but I like this look, it brings back memories. Memories? Of what? Klein asked as he and the other two saw the melancholy expression on the blonde face. Naruto couldn't help but smile as he tilted his head up to look at the ceiling. Of my first bowl of ramen, noticing the confused looks that he was getting from his friends, Naruto shifted his body forward until his arms were resting on the counter. You see, when I was a kid, I was heavily bullied almost all the time. They would call me names, beat me up and a lot of other things as well. That's horrible. Asuna exclaimed as she slammed her palms onto the counter. Why didn't any adults try to help you? What about your parents? Didn't have any at the time. My birth parents died the same day I was born, Naruto replied with a shrug, though the others were shocked. Kirito and Klein were more so because they knew that Naruto was Akihiko Kaaba's younger brother, but from what he was saying, it was a year after what I am talking about that I was adopted by a loving family. But to answer your question, Asuna, it wasn't only kids that bullied me, the adults just ignored my existence and let it happen. What the hell, man? That is messed up. Klein said with a heavy frown. It was an adult's job to help out the younger generation become better people, and for them to turn their back on an innocent child, one that he had become close friends with, it was sickening. Yeah, well, it's in the past. I have almost completely forgotten about them now. It's not like they could do anything to me now. Anyway, back to the story. It was around nighttime when I was on my way home. It was raining really heavy, and the kids at school had stolen my umbrella, though it was a piece of crap anyway. Naruto whispered the last part to himself before continuing. Anyway, I was trying to find a place to find some shelter without anyone spotting me when all of a sudden I started to smell something delicious in the air. I was really hungry at the time, so I followed it until I arrived at this small restaurant that still had its lights on, shining brightly through the rain. In a hurry, I made it to the entrance and just stood outside, making sure that I couldn't be seen by the owner. Kirito felt his fists tighten harder as he listened to his best friend's story. Are you saying that they would have actually kicked you out into the rain? Without any hesitation, but that night was different, Naruto answered with a nod before his serious expression softened and a smile grew on his face. I had glanced into the place out of curiosity, but as soon as I did the owner saw me. I was scared at first and was about to run, but he called out to me and told me to come inside so I could get out of the rain. Well, I was confused and scared. I did what he said and came inside. He flashed me a smile and went into the back room before coming back with a large towel in hand. He walked around his booth and actually helped clean me up. Once I nice and dry, he placed me on one of the stools before he got to work on making me something to eat. He sounds like a really nice man, Asuna said with a smile as she heard Naruto's story. Anyone who would help a kid in distress like that is awesome in my book, Klein added while Kirito nodded his head. Naruto could feel his smile continue to grow as he continued. I had asked him why he was being so nice to me, and it was the next thing that he said that I would always remember. He said to me, kid, it doesn't matter to me what people say about someone. If I see someone who needs help, I will never turn my back on them, and right now all I see is a boy who was all alone in the rain. It was the first time someone had ever showed me such kindness and actually meant it, and all I could do was sit there in silence as he placed a bowl of ramen in front of me, and once I started to eat the ramen I couldn't help but cry. It was the most delicious thing I had ever had. He told me it was on the house and that once I was done I could spend the night with him and his daughter since the rain wasn't going to let up. That's a wonderful story, Naruto. Did you ever go back? Asuna tilted her head a little as she smiled at her blonde friend. A few times, but after I was adopted by my family I could never find it again, Naruto replied as he closed his eyes while crossing his arms. I looked several times but never found anything, and even when my brother tried to help we came up empty. Nevertheless, my brother said that he would continue to look for me so we could have a bowl together, and I think he said something about gratitude or whatever, but I can't remember. Wow, who knew that someone like Kaaba would do something like that? It's almost hard to believe that he's the same guy that imprisoned us all here, Klein thought to himself as he looked down at his drink, not knowing that Kirito was having similar thoughts. But before anyone could say anything else, Tucci and AM returned with 4 large steaming bowls in their hands. I hope you guys are ready. Thanks to all your hard work, I managed to complete my ultimate ramen recipe. And I also managed to figure out what I can do to make more of this, so you guys can come back for more whenever you want. WHOA, it smells amazing. Klein exclaimed as the NPCs placed the bowls in front of each of them. I can't wait to try it. Asuna said in agreement as she grabbed her chopsticks, which according to Naruto was the best way to eat them. Kirito nodded his head with a smile as he looked down at the soup and saw all the ingredients that they had collected inside of it. It looks almost too perfect to eat. Well then, what are we waiting for? Naruto said as he and the others used their chopsticks to grab onto a decent amount of noodles. Itadakimasu. Itadakimasu. The other three echoed before the four took their first bite of the ultimate ramen and froze. Thanks for watching.